Hey guys, I just want to start this off by saying a really big welcome to you all and thank you for joining my Unreal tutorial series. I aim to teach you a lot of the basics of Unreal and then to move on into some more intermediate kind of tools and tasks so that you'll be able to flesh out scenes and go on and create whatever you want really using this really powerful engine. Um, I'm glad to have you all here. And I've just set up part one to kind of get everyone into what it is that we're going to be doing, understanding the engine, a few of the different really basic tools that we're going to need to use to get on. But hopefully what's going to happen throughout the course of this tutorial and this tutorial series, sorry, is that you're going to be able to take what you've learned here and apply it to all manner of different things. So you'll be able to create scenes that use hard surface or something like this, which is more organic. You'll be able to make variations of this scene. And what I'd like to hope is that you don't follow what I do exactly, but kind of use your own imagination to riff on it. And it's going to be awesome to see what you guys come up with throughout the course. But yeah, just take what I'm saying and riff on it. Make your own versions of these things. Build the scenes out in different ways, create the paths differently to how I have, use different materials. Essentially what I would be doing is just showing you the systems, and if you can riff on those, use your own imagination and create something entirely different, that will also be awesome. So but then if you'd like to, please just follow along also to a T, just to make sure that you know and nail down everything. That's also fine too. But for part one, which is what we're going to be starting now, it's going to begin off with just some engine familiarization. That's a long word. We'll be just looking at, I'll go through the engine, go through all the tabs, make sure you understand the different windows and so that nothing pops up and freaks you out, or so that you have an overall understanding of what it is that you need to do here. Then for part two, which is quite short, part two of part one, sorry, we'll just look at the organization tools. These things are quite key just for stopping your projects becoming too messy. And also in production, they're used vigorously, if that's the right word. And things like the level system, and folders and organization folder structures, stuff like that. So it's always a good idea to know these things. Then we'll move on to lighting workflows because lighting's such a big part of this. And I'll just show you the basics of lighting and kind of what you need just to get the scene going and to be able to see everything. But also I'll give that like underlying understanding of it. And then we'll push on into more detailed lighting information and more creative lighting stuff as we get into the later parts of the tutorial series, when we kind of have a scene fleshed out for us to do that. But at first, I'll just explain kind of the differences in lighting workflows, just because from UE4 to UE5, there are some differences, and there's also differences between baked lighting and dynamic lighting. And depending on what you're trying to do, if you're just like mocking up concepts or you want to create a fully fledged game, then there are different directions that you might want to go into. And then to round this first section off, we'll just block out the internal cave area of the scene. Using primitives from Unreal, so like basic boxes and things like that, just to get the scene going and to get you understanding and creating something in the engine. And then we'll move on from there into pulling in proper content and so on. But yes, thanks for joining me, and I hope you're all as excited as I am. So let's get going. Okay, so let's get started. What I'll do is just start from the very beginning. So this is my just very empty desktop. Just want to hit start and type Unreal or Epic Games Launcher or and that will get you there. And what that will do is open this app, which is the Epic Games Launcher. Along the top are generally what we're going to need here, and down the side not so much. Down the side, home, store and library kind of take you to your games library and stuff, so we'll not be needing that so much. If we're just using the editor, this stuff along the top is what we'll need. So let's start at the first one. UE4 is UE4, and this just has some interesting stuff about what's going on in UE4 and the UE4 community. So this just has if you click on this one, it will take you to the Unreal website where they'll talk you through some of the latest changes in the latest release. They have some featured content here, which some of them are tutorials, others are cinematics and things that they want to showcase. The same with down the bottom, some featured marketplace content. So it's always good to just have a look through here and see what's new, see what's happening. And on the right hand side, they do this featured screenshot thing, which is quite cool. So whenever anyone's posted up some awesome work, I presume someone from Unreal kind of trawls through ArtStation or a bunch of other places and then fronts it here just to get people looking at the things that you can do. So it's cool to have a look at these. Just give them a click and see what's going on. The next section is Learn, which is what hopefully you guys will be doing through this. Some of these are really old, some of these are new, some of them are super useful, some of them not so much anymore. But they're all good if you get stuck somewhere on something else that's not going to be covered in this tutorial, that you can watch through these, and generally they give you some information about what to do. The next one, and also documentation up here, which is very useful. I use this often. If I forget something or I forget the way something works, you can just hit that, type in generally what it is that you're looking for, and a lot of times you'll get it. So that's super useful. There's the marketplace, which is great for kind of what we're going to do too with all of the Megascans content, but also if you're trying to prototype games or you just want some audio or a bunch of things, really. People have made almost everything that you can imagine, and there's some stuff in here that goes from, I don't know, more than 133 quid. There's some stuff that's got to be nearing like 400 in here, down to, is there anything free here just now? There's nothing free directly in front of me, but I promise you there is a load of free stuff too. So I always suggest, if you're thinking that you might need something from the store, just have a look at it in the free section too. So you can type in something. So you could type in, I don't know, cats. And you get a bunch of stuff about cats. A big cat pack, low poly cats, advanced cats, toon cats, bunch of cat stuff. And what you can do also is, over where it says max price, just hit the free button. Unfortunately, there are no free cat things. So you'd probably have to pay for it if you wanted to find something for cats. But yeah, that's the way that I use the store generally. I'll think of something that I need. Maybe there's a blueprint that I'm not sure how to make myself. There's not anything online that teaches you how to make it, and my brain can't quite get there. So I'll look on the store, see if there's anything free. If there isn't, I'll probably pay for it, and then pick it apart and work out how it is they did it, just to kind of learn myself, because it's always best when you know how to do these things, or when you can learn how to do these things, and then you can make all manner of iterations of it. The next section is your library, but we'll skip on and go back to that. Twinmotion, this is, as it says on here, we'll not be covering this, but it's a great set of tools for architecture, construction, urban planning, and landscaping professionals. Twinmotion combines an intuitive, icon-driven interface with the power of Unreal Engine. So if you were planning on doing those things, this stuff might be useful. But for what we're going to do, it's not. So we'll skip over that. And then the last tab, which is what we'll be using, is UE5, which has a bunch of stuff added. I will agree there are some stability issues and things here and there that don't work quite as well as they should do yet. But I think for what we're doing and for trying to future-proof this tutorial, there's a bunch of stuff in UE5 that obviously comes from UE4, so we can still do the old lighting workflows and a bunch of different things, plus the UE5 Lumen stuff on top, plus the newer interface. So I think it would be a good idea for us to all do this following through UE5. If you really don't want to and you want to do it through UE4, then sure. This will all still work, except for when we go over to do stuff in Lumen, you're going to be using the old dynamic lighting workflow. But you can follow this whole thing along using UE4. Other than Lumen, I don't use anything that is UE5 specific. So you would be fine if you wanted to do that. So to get started off, just hit the download button on Download Early Access. And what will happen is, over in Library, you'll get a version of UE5 here, and then your older version of UE4, if you've used this launcher before, will sit there. So the last version of UE4 I used was 4.26.2, and the version of UE5 I use is here. And you can launch them independently here. I think only one at a time, though, so I couldn't have... I'm not sure. I don't even want to give that a go. They'd both probably crash. But that's how you launch them. If you want to add a new engine version after you've added your UE5, you just hit the plus button there, and then this gives you a drop down of all of the engine versions that are possible for you to download. Underneath that are all of your projects where it says my projects, And these are all of your projects. These are all of my projects. These are my failed ones. Some that I've finished. There are less that I've finished than I have. There are less. There are less here than I've finished than I've not finished. I think that's the way around to say it. So there's a bunch of test things. There's a bunch of projects that I didn't manage to finish, but this is basically your project graveyard, and they all sit here. Hopefully yours will be more successful than mine. And basically what you do is when you start a new project, it will go here, and then you can load it from here rather than from up here in future. So let's get started with doing something new. I have the tutorials here, but let's call it, you can call it whatever you want, but just so that I don't have an endless bunch of ones called sword in the stone or sword tutorial, I'm going to make a new one and call it something else. So all you want to do is just hit that launch button, and we'll wait for UE5 to launch. It shouldn't take too long. I find generally this one loads a little bit quicker than UE4, but that can depend on project size and if you've got shaders compiled and so on. Oh, one thing I can go over still, actually, before it closes down, is when... it's gone now. But you saw that window at the bottom, the area at the bottom there. When you download things from the marketplace, it adds them... Well, when you download them, when you purchase them from the marketplace, it adds them to that second section underneath your projects. And that is where you then click on those items and select which project you want to add them to. And then it downloads them and adds them to that project folder. So that's how downloading stuff from the marketplace works. For a while, I'd download things and be like, why is it not automatically in my project? But that's not how it works. And it's good that way, because then it stops them from being downloaded to absolutely every single project that you have, because that would waste lots of space. So you specifically pick which project it is that you want to download them to. Okay, so this next window that pops up, this only pops up when you load the editor rather than load the project. So you don't get this window when you load the project, only when you load the editor. In here, you get the same thing with your recent projects. Underneath, these are basically kind of prefabricated projects for you. And they're made to help you kind of get over the first hurdle in setting up and just get you straight in. So if you want to make a game, you're most likely going to want to hit the Games tab. And then you can do stuff like get a blank project, which is pretty much completely empty. It just has a scene for you to go on and a camera that you can move around. This first person one gives you a gun, a character who looks kind of like a robot, and a bunch of different mechanics for that character, so you can jump and shoot. Things that you might want as a first-person player. A first-person game, sorry. Then there's a puzzle, which is a very simple puzzle. This one features a simple grid of blocks and the camera position so that you can begin to make your puzzle game. Third-person game, similar to first-person, but just third-person. I don't think this one has a gun. There's a top-down game, so yeah, essentially top-down. Some handheld AR stuff, which I've never actually used, but that might be quite interesting to have a look at. VR setup if you've got a VR camera, and VR headset, sorry, and then a vehicle advanced, which is a pretty sweet one. So the vehicle advanced one just gives you like this really cool buggy that has suspension and a bunch of other stuff that's really good for prototyping and working out some cool vehicle games. There also used to be, I'm not sure if it's here anymore, I guess it's gone in UE5. There's a flying car one, there was a vehicle unadvanced version, and some other ones that were quite useful, but I guess they've ripped them out for some reason. Then you can go down on these tabs to the left to film, video, and live events. So these are some things that are useful for stuff like that. Architecture and construction, so some archviz scenes. And these all have like little blueprints set up in them that make your life a little bit easier. So like in this one at the bottom, automotive product design and manufacturing, this photo studio is actually quite useful for rendering all sorts of things, because it's got like this really cool studio setup and you can change the floor. And it's got like a nice light in the background well, a bunch of nice lights, some soft studio lights and stuff, and you can rotate them around. So if you create some finished assets that are quite large, it's not so amazing for small assets. You can just use the default scene and kind of shoehorn it to render better. The photo studio, if you're using larger assets, it doesn't have to be as big as a car. I don't know, it could be like a power generator or something like that. is quite useful to use. So I would suggest giving that a go if you want to. It gives you, yeah, a bunch of stuff that's set up. But for this, what we're going to want to do is, to start this off, I would say you could either go for first person or blank. We're going to have a flying camera that goes through this, so the first person thing's not completely necessary, but sometimes it is nice to just run around the scene. I'm going to go for blank just because it's not entirely necessary, but if you do want to run around your scene and shoot your trees and stuff, then sure, hit first person. This stuff only comes into play when you hit play anyway, so and seeing as we're going to be using cinematics, that's fine, but I'm just going to use blank for now just to avoid the clutter. So if you just click on the blank there, and then over on the right hand side we've got Blueprint or C++. I know absolutely nothing about code. I know a little bit about blueprints, so I'm just going to keep it on Blueprint. Target platform at the moment is desktop. Quality, let's set that to maximum. Let's include the starter content. I always include the starter content just because sometimes I forget things, and there's a bunch of different materials in starter content that kind of show you how to do things like parallax occlusion mapping. Tessellation's been removed from Unreal 5, so yeah, not that, but I used to use it for that as well. Just a bunch of cool little things. There's like a fire in there. There are some VFX things that we might want to use as a base. So I always keep starter content on, just so I'm able to, if I want to, go in there and grab that stuff and work it out. And then over where it says project name, you type in the project name. So you can type in whatever you want for this. Just remember that it's going to be stuck for the project. So for this one, let's call this part. I want to call it part 1 intro. What do I want to call it? Tutorial. If I could spell it. There we go. And it can't contain a space, but that's fine. And then you can also set where you want the project location to be. I'm just going to leave it where it's giving me it automatically. That's fine. And then hit create. And it might take a few seconds. I think it might take you guys a bit longer just because, or it might take you longer if you haven't downloaded and opened the editor before. There'll be a bunch of shaders to compile and stuff. But if you have used the editor before, this won't take too long. Sweet. So now we've got the editor in front of us. Just hit that button there. If you get that, I always press update. You may as well. You get the editor in front of you, and you get this test scene instantly. And I think maybe now's a good time just to go over the controls of how it is that you move around inside the editor. So to get moving, what you want to do, you'll notice that if you press WASD on their own just now, nothing happens. To get moving, you want to hold right click and then press any one of those buttons, and it'll allow you to move around. You also need to right click to move. So it's not exactly like a first person shooter, but if you hold right click, it's pretty similar to a first person shooter. To allow you to do that, which I just did there, to like sort of pan around, you need to hold right and left click, and that'll allow you to do that. And then scroll lets you scroll, and you can also hold the middle mouse to do that too. And you can do all of these things whilst also pressing WASD. So that gets you moving around. Just have a little practice. It should feel natural just because it's the same as any first-person game you've ever played on PC, except you need to hold right or left click to allow it to start doing that. To click assets, you literally just click on the assets on the screen, and they'll give you an orange highlight. And the orange highlight's super useful because at some point you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff in your scene. And this just means that you can, see stuff really, really easily and readily. And I think, the outline kind of scales depending on how far away you are as well. So it's always nice and visible. You can click on glass stuff like that. And then if you don't want to click on the glass stuff, so transparency, things with transparency, you can press T, and that turns transparency selections off. So I can click on things that are like this table that are not transparent, but if I try and click on something that is transparent, it won't allow me to click on it. And then you just press T again to allow you to click on them again. So this is really useful for when you have things like clouds on cards. So imagine I had a big card in front of us, just a big 2D plane, and there was a cloud on it, and I wanted to, or anything that you have that's transparent, and I want to click the things behind it. What will happen is you'll constantly click on the transparent object in front of you. And to allow you to stop doing that, you just press T. And then you can't press it, you can't click it, press T again, you can click on it again. So that one's quite useful. To move the objects around, you click on them, and then it gives you a gizmo, and you just click and drag on the areas on the gizmos. So for each axis. And then to change axis, W, E, and R changes you from just regular translation to to rotation, and then to scale. And you do exactly the same thing, just click and drag on the axes, and then that'll allow you to do those things. At the moment, all of those are step snapped. So we can change that up the top here on the right hand side. And you'll see that all of our movement snaps. So that's to every 10 Unreal units. Our rotation is snapped to the same, and our scale is to 0.25. So you can change those to different ones. So that's smaller. And then where are we before here? Sorry, so that's even smaller. And then, I'm using the wrong one. I was using scale. There you go. Yeah, you see it working there. And then you can just turn them off. So they're blue when they're on. Click them, you can turn them off, and then you can freely scale and rotate. And you can do the same with moving things. I generally try and keep snap on when moving things, just for things that are non-organic, so for like architecture and stuff, just so that you can get things snapped quite well to each other. If you turn it off, you can get things looking quite wonky, and it's quite hard to line walls up and stuff. But for what we're going to be doing with organic stuff and placing in a level, turning it off is absolutely fine. Up here, we'll also, as you cycle through, show you which one you're on. So you can see it changing there. And then this will tell you if the gizmo is, so if I move that over here, between world or local coordinates. Okay, this one over here is camera speed. So this one's quite useful. At the moment, as you zoom in and out, that feels quite comfortable. But as your scene gets much, much bigger, and say you want to get to this bit all the way over there, it might take you quite a while if you can't select it. So you can push up the camera speed to something much faster, and then I'm over here really quick, rather than if you were to have it on 1 and you tried to get over there. You see how slow that's taking you, how long that's taking you, sorry. So let's undo that. And then a really good way, if you can select it, to get over to somewhere that's far away is if you select on the asset, or you could find it in the world outliner to your right, and then just press F, and it will zoom you straight to the asset. That one's also really useful. I use that all the time. While we're on the subject of flying around, if you are moving forward, so if we go, let's move all the way back over here. If you're moving forward and you scroll the mouse wheel backwards at the same time, it slows you down. And if you scroll it up, it speeds you up. Scroll it down, it slows you down. That seems to be, one thing that confuses me every now and again, is it seems to be a little bit independent to this. So this doesn't change. There is a scaler there, I guess. Is that what's doing this? So if I scroll it all the way back and hit that, that's at 46. If I keep scrolling, what's it at now? No, so that's also, it works independently. But you can use the scroll as you're moving to either speed up or slow down your movement. Which is quite useful. So let's move that back to 4 and get that over there. Okay, so you can make it move really slowly if you scroll backwards as you move, or if you want to speed it up, scroll forwards as you move, rather than just constantly switching over here. So that's just generally how you move about in the engine. If you press G, this is non-game view. Press G again, this is game view. So non-game view basically means you can see all of these little widgety bits. These are all things that are inside your level, but you can't see them. So if you hide them, they get hidden. So that one's the lighting. You can see the lighting kind of goes there. Some of these are reflection captures. We'll talk about all of these different things as we go. And there's an atmospheric fog there. So these are all movable around the level, but that doesn't mean that they move the thing that's attached to them. So like the light, if you use just a regular translation, doesn't move the light. You need to rotate it to move it around. And that's how that works. It's how a bunch of different things work. But to hide all of those and to see it as you would see it in game, just press G. That will take away all of the widgety bits, and that'll add them back. The full screen, just hit F11. And then if you full screen and hit G, you've got something that's pretty similar to what your package project is going to look like. Press F11 to get back, and then G to get them all back. Over here, we've got stuff that you'd expect from a 3D package. There's perspective. You can change that to top, bottom, left, right, front, or back. And then there's also a cinematic viewport, which gives you a cinematic camera. And then a bunch of other stuff that you can do, like grids and so on, just to really pick your cinematic shots. But just want the default viewport for now. That's fine. These all, just give you what you'd expect. Different orthographic views. The next one, lit, you'll use quite often. And this is helpful for kind of debugging things and working out what's exactly going on with your scene. And these just change the view mode. So you can see it unlit. You can see it in wireframe. You can see all the player collision. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do in here. These are just the reflections. You can see if you go down to optimization view modes, there's a bunch of stuff in here like light map density. We'll cover all of this. These are all helpful things for debugging. Light map densities, basically when we're baking lighting, just you kind of want everything to be green, maybe pushing towards orange on the floors just to get a higher level of detail in the lights. But this helps you debug that and make sure all of your assets are lighting correctly. Light complexity. It's another fairly useful one. Everything here is super blue, but just it helps you debug as you move into trying to look at frame rate and what you can do to make the game run faster. We'll not get into that stuff just because we're not making a game, but this is where all of these things live. We will look at light map density though. Shader complexity shows you how complex the shader is. So generally how expensive it is. So good is green, bad is this kind of red color, and then extremely bad, we're getting into pinks and whites. You can see that this transparent things just in general, just because they are transparent, they're more expensive than regular shaders, so they will always be red, unless you do some special shader trickery. But don't get too worried about this stuff at the moment. And then some nanite visualization. Buffer visualizations are kind of your outputs, I guess. So you click on those and you can see things like this is the metalness. This one's your roughness. This will help you troubleshoot too, see why things might be looking weird in your scene. It will let you see the specular of things. So these are all super useful as well. Base color is a good one as well, just for working out why things might be getting a bit noisy. So they're all super useful. And then show. This is, I would try not to play with these. If you ever get in a position where you know there's something in your scene but you can't find it or click on it, just run back to use defaults. You don't want all of these things on at once. So if I had collision on, you'd see collision all the time, and it's not totally necessary. I tend to just put it on when I need to see where the collision is. I'll just use this one here. Okay, cool. The other stuff, I mean, is it so important to go through here? Yeah, let's just give it a quick overview. This is where you'll create new levels, open levels, save levels. There's a bunch of different saves, and that's just because of the way, I guess, that the engine works with assets. So if you hit save current level, that will literally save the current level that we're in. At the moment, we're in minimal default. That won't save all of the different assets that you've edited. So we could be working on the materials for this and the floor materials on this floor, and I could have re-imported a new version of the chair. If we hit save current level, it won't save all of that stuff. It will just save the current level. Save current level as saves the current level as. Save all will also save all of those different things at the same time. And choose files to save will bring you up a big list and ask you to pick which ones you want to save. The other ones also bring you up a big list and you can choose, but yeah. These are just imports and exports, so you can just export things straight out of the engine. You can also make new projects here and go back to other projects, so you don't have to close down the engine to go back to that project window. You can do that from here. Edit has a bunch of stuff in it that you'd be used to. Cut and copy, they all use the same hotkeys that you'd always use. Duplicate, which is useful. And then editor preferences, project settings, plugins, and connect to source control. Source control we're not going to use, but this is something you'll use in studio environments, something like Perforce or something that allows you to upload stuff and download stuff, and so everyone can work on the same project and lock files and so on together. So you could be using that in a studio environment, but we'll not go through that here. Editor preferences and project settings. I'm trying to think if we'll add any of these during. I think we might do, because we'll be adding the Quixel bridge. But yeah, this allows you to edit some things, some key things in the project. If you want to turn on ray tracing and stuff, so on, you'll need to do that through here. These windows are useful because, yeah, this is where you'll load the cinematic sequencer, although you can also load it here. There might be some things missing from the original loadout, so we might need to load them from here. But in general, most of the stuff's already open. As you can see, it's got a tick next to it. If it's got a tick next to it, it means it's already open somewhere in front of you. So you can see details is here. And the environment light mixer is loaded. It's over here. It was on my other window. But I'll pull that over when we need it, just because we don't have a lot of real estate in this window at the moment. Tools here are useful too, but also, yeah, these ones along here are what we're going to be doing generally. Build all levels is what we'll be doing. Build reflection captures as well. This is kind of what you'll be doing when you're building lighting. Building landscape is what we'll be doing a lot as well, just for when we get trees and stuff going. But generally, this is used for when you're baking lighting and stuff. So not so necessary, but we'll be hitting build landscape, grass maps and stuff fairly often as well, just to get things to update. And then some help stuff over here, which is useful. This will take you to the documentation online, which is, yeah, really good. It's quite thorough. There's a lot of stuff going on in there that will be useful. Okay, so down the bottom, we've got our content browser. The content browser is where you're going to store everything. That's where everything wants to sit. You want to make your folders in here. You want to add your assets in here. You can see the starter content is here. And if you just start clicking through these folders, you'll see things like architecture. And to get this stuff into level, you just click on it and drag it in. And there you go. We have a wall 400 by 300. And that's snapping around. And then we can make another wall. Snap that to that wall. And you can see that's nice and tight there. Can't even see the line in between. So have a practice with that, just dragging things into level. And over on the top right hand corner, you've got the world outliner. This will show you absolutely everything that exists in your level. Literally everything. So everything that exists in there is here. This is very useful. I cannot stress how important it is to put things in folders, because it can be a pain if you've got a massive scene with hundreds of rocks. They'll all be listed here and you'll be scrolling forever. You can also search in here, which is useful. So I could just type light and then it'll give me the lights. The details tab underneath this, it only really shows when you click on something, and then it gives you all of the details of the thing that you've clicked on. So if I clicked on this chair, it's a static mesh showing me that it's a static mesh, and these are all of the things that I can do to it. These are all the settings with it. You can also translate it here. You can rotate it here. You can put in a number if you want to, just to get it perfect. You can also change out the chair to something else. This little spyglass will let you find the chair in the content browser, and you could just click on another chair and switch it through there. So if you like the position it's in but want it to be a different asset, you can do that. Control Z to undo. And the material, so I can just whack on a completely different material onto that chair as well. So you can just click on the door. I could add the door material to the chair. That makes no sense because they have unique UVs, but you can do that. That's how you do that. Then there's a bunch of settings underneath. Some of these you need to know. Some of these you kind of stumble on as you go through, I guess. There are things like physics, so you can simulate physics on it. and that'll let you shoot it, and it will, or if you put it up in the air when you hit play, it will drop. And you can change the settings for how it will behave. These are the collision settings. Not so useful for us now, but in games they are very useful. You can set them to do a whole bunch of different things. So you can set it to have no collision, so the player could run through it. You can set it so only the player can hit it. You could turn it into a trigger. You can do a whole bunch of different things in the collision presets there. There are some lighting stuff here. So there's an overridden light map resolution, and this allows you, to override the size of the light map. And you can do this at the end of when you're kind of optimizing a scene and making sure that the lighting's working properly, rather than going into each asset. Because say I went into into this chair. Say I've got 50 chairs in this scene, and they're all different sizes. If I went and edited the size of the light map for the base chair, because these are all instances, all of them will change light map resolution. And that doesn't make much sense, because some would be bigger than others, or could be bigger than others. So you can override the light map size of a particular instance here. And there's a whole bunch of other light mask settings in here that are useful or not useful, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. Setting it to cast shadows is always useful, so you can turn that off and on too. You can make it not visible to rendering. I don't suggest doing that one, because you can very easily lose an asset. That's gone. I don't know where that is until I find it in the outliner and click it, and then make it visible again. Whereas if you do something here where it says actor hidden in game, if you want to hide something, when you press G, it disappears. But when you are in non-game mode, in editor mode, I guess is what this would be called, you can see it. So you can hide it from game or unhide it from game. And a lot of these things, like these widgets and stuff, are all basically hidden in game. So where were we? Where should we get to? Yeah. So yeah, I would not use visible. If you're going to use visible, you may as well just delete the asset, really. HLOD's not so important. I think the rest of this stuff's not going to be super necessary for us. But yeah, a bunch of data stuff down there. But most of the stuff we're going to need is all up here, and that's how you'll control the asset and do some edits to it. If you click on an asset and press Control B, that takes you also to its place in the control panel, in the content browser, sorry. And you just double click on that asset. Sorry, it's opened it in the other window, and then that will give you another window just completely specific to this asset. Okay, and this does a bunch of things, really. But I think most importantly, the way to look at it is that it controls the base asset. Generally, if you click on the asset in the scene and then edit it through the details, it allows you to edit the instance of this asset, and you could have many instances throughout a level. But this allows you to edit the base asset. So let's go through some of the things that you can do in here. You can move around. I don't know why that was going so slow then. You can move around the asset in the scene in the same way that you do move around in the main engine. If you hold Alt and click, left click, you need to left click, you can pivot around kind of the view that you have currently. And that's quite helpful in here. So you don't, like, you're not trying to fly around it to see the back or something like that. You can just hold Alt and then spin it around, and then you'll see the behind of it. Okay, cool. If you also, can you change it? Yeah. If you hold L and then left click and move around, that'll change the light around it. So you not always have to move around it. You can just see how the asset's reacting to light and troubleshoot it from there too. So that's that. And then if we start at the top, on the right hand side, this is the details, which works exactly the same as the other details. There are a few more settings, and as I said before, this works just for the base asset, not the instances. This will filter out to the instances, but if you want to change the details of a specific instance, you need to do that in the instance in the level. So there is this material slots, which is the first one that comes up, and that allows you to look at all of the different material slots that an asset has. So if this asset had 3 material splits, you'd see them as element 0, which is the first ones, element 1, element 2. And if you forget which ones they are, you can highlight it, or you can isolate it. If there were more than one, you'd be able to isolate just the area of the material. You can change the name of the slot there also. And you can change the material here too by just clicking the drop down, and then you can search through all of your materials. So if I wanted to, I could just give it this cobblestone material. But I don't want to do that, so let's not do that. So in nanite settings, you can turn it into a nanite mesh. This is only really useful for things that are quite high poly, so we'll not need to do that for this. And the stuff that we're going to pull in from Megascans, we'll choose whether we want it to be a nanite mesh or not based on just how dense or how close we get to the asset. So we don't need to do that just now, but this is how you would enable it and turn it into an asset, a nanite asset, sorry, which basically means it's like Unreal's new special polygons that aren't as expensive as just general geometry. I'm not quite sure exactly how it works, but it's going to be the future of real time. Yeah. So then there's also this LOD picker here, which allows you to choose the LODs. At the moment, this doesn't have a LOD setup. So the only LOD that exists is the current LOD, which is LOD 0. You can change the LOD settings here by hitting where it says LOD group here. And then you can change which type of group it is. So if it was foliage or a high detail prop, a large prop, a level architecture. And basically what that'll do is it'll assign an amount of LODs and at what distance they should LOD. Now, for most instances, especially in environment creation, the auto LOD groups that Unreal gives an asset are just fine. There are only so many instances. I think sometimes, well, most of the time, characters, some like, I don't know, really specific cinematic props that you might not want to see pop as you move in and out. They might require some custom LODs or at least some tweaking of the LODs that you already have. But in general, the auto LOD system in Unreal is awesome and works really well. So if you need to optimize your scene, I would start with lodding things, because if you've got a really high poly asset that you can see all the time from a long distance away, then it's going to be rendering it with all of those polygons all the time from a long distance away. So a good way to fix that is to give it LODs, and it gives it different level of details for the distance that you are at. And then you can tweak those settings in here. So how far away it is, the reduction settings, so basically how much it's reduced by, and so on. You can also change the amount of LODs there as well. So these are general settings. Light map resolution, so at the moment it's quite small, but for how it's seen in the scene, that's fine. You might want to push it up, change it to 128 or something like that. And if you do that, you'll need to apply it, but we can have a look at that soon when we get into talking about light maps and doing the different lighting workflows. This is the collision stuff, which is exactly the same as I'd explained in the other details, and it's just where you can have a fiddle with the collision, change the collision presets. You can also view your collision up. Trying to remember where it is now. Here it is. So under show, this is changed slightly from UE4. And that will show your complex collision. Your complex collision is generally the mesh itself, and the simple collision, which is the things that people will walk into, are the simple collision. And you can edit that. We don't really need to for this project, but I'll show you how. So you can add any of these things here. So you can add a sphere simplified collision, which will just fit a sphere to the same general shape of your asset. Capsule ones, box simplified collisions, or you can go down here to this auto convex collision, which allows you to tweak some settings. So you could do, if I put it on, let me show you it. Turn the simple collision on and just give it a sphere for now. So that's the sphere. I mean, well, yeah, let's leave that. We don't really need to give it a sphere. But down here, you can see the old collision, well, the collision it currently has. We're about to change it, and you can change the hull count. So that's how many different separate pieces of geometry there are that make up this piece of collision. So we could go to 10. There's no point, but we could do just to show you. And then you can up the amount of verts that it has. Now, the more of this that you add, the more expensive it gets. And then the precision will just be how precise it will be. And then you hit apply. And then this should do some things, and then update. And now you have a more precise collision. Now, this isn't entirely necessary for a chair, because the chair, you're going to run into it at so many different angles, and you could probably do this with just 2 boxes, which is basically how it was before. But that's how you would increase the collision precision on a mesh that you might want in a game that maybe someone has to jump on, and so on. So what else have we got going on here? If we scroll down, that's collision. Import settings. These are quite useful. When you import a new mesh, it will give you a bunch of these. This box will kind of come up, and then there'll be a bunch of settings. Now, once you've imported something, you might want to change those settings again for the next time that you import it, and that could be anything like combine meshes. You could turn that on. So basically, if you have a mesh that has like 4 different pieces to it, if you import it and don't have combine meshes ticked on, it'll import those 4 separate pieces of geometry. If you import it and have combined meshes on, that will combine them all into one piece of geometry. There's also a bunch of other stuff in here that's really useful. So there's materials, and it will I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. It tries to find every material that's kind of linked to it in the folders that it's come from or wherever. So you could have a scene in Maya with a whole bunch of different assets with all different materials on it. And if you have generate material on, when it imports them, it will try its best to find all of the textures that are linked with it and then create its own material in Unreal. This is only so successful, and it works, I say, to give you a starting ground. So it means you don't have to try and find all of these different textures and stuff yourself. But it's fairly successful. It will get a scene going at least. So you might want to change those all afterwards. So that's where those exist. And then there's ray tracing stuff if you want it to support ray tracing. And then this stuff's not so necessary. We'll not worry about these. But yeah, those are those details there for the asset. Up here, these are all kind of the same as what's in the other viewer. We went over the collision, and then yeah, this is just more window stuff. So yeah, I think we're okay with this window. So that's kind of your asset viewer, and that one you'll use a lot, and it's quite useful for checking out an asset, debugging, changing things with the asset. Oh, if you want to make this go away, this little flashing thing here, click on it, and it's basically a tutorial, and you can just do the drop down and say exit, and then that should never come up again. It can be quite annoying, but it's basically what we've just done, but in words, and a bit more boring, and that just takes you through the asset itself, or the asset viewer itself, sorry. So it's taken us to a random cube one for that tutorial. So you can close that out now. Okay, so that in general is the layout. What have we missed out? Oh, these things here. Okay, cool. So if you want to create a new asset, hit that create button there. You can also, yeah, this just saves the current level. There's this create button here, which allows you to create a whole bunch of different things. If you can't find the thing you want to create, just go to all classes, and then you can start typing. So you could type sphere, and it will give you all of the things that say sphere. If you go to here and type sphere, it will try and find a sphere inside the cinematic drop down, so it might not find something. So if you're trying to find something, do all classes, and then all you do is just click and drag it out into the scene, or just click it and it will plonk it at 0. I think that's at world 0. There you go. Yeah, drops it at world 0. So that's create. That's where you find all of your engine assets. Content will just give you more content browsers. You can have 4 if you want. Blueprints will take. This is the blueprint drop down loadout, I guess, and this allows you to create new blueprints. You can also do that in a different way, which I'll show you soon. And then cinematics allows you to add new level sequences or a master sequence, and then it once you've got either of those, you can load them by clicking here. There'll be another little bit that tells you the name of the sequence, and then you can click on it from there. This over here this is just regular selecting, but then you can also go into landscape mode, which allows you to start creating landscapes. And then there's foliage painter mode, which allows you to start painting foliage. So you can drop some assets here and then paint them around. We'll get into that for sure, and we'll also get into landscape mode. There's mesh painting, which allows you to paint vertex colors on meshes and do a whole bunch of different things. So you can paint red vertex color on something. What else? There is fracture editing also. There is also active brush editing. So if you've got a piece of geometry from the engine, you can edit that here at a vert level. And then there's play, which allows you to play the game. So if you've got a game set up and you could set up a blueprint that loads the cinematic automatically, pressing play there will run that, or it will also, if you did first person mode, pressing play will allow you to enter first person mode and you can run around and shoot. And then yeah, this just has some settings based on different platforms, so you could package all of your content up for Android or iOS or a whole bunch of different things there. So that's the took a little while, but that's the general editor layout. Going on from here, let's import an asset. I think probably is a good place to go, so I can show you through those import settings. We're going to be doing that a lot, so it'd be good to just go over that very quickly, and then we can start talking about organization. Okay guys, so what I've decided to do is just roll this next bit about the organization and stuff into us importing an asset. I'm going to go over importing an asset in a bit more depth later on, but just in terms of getting organization and using levels and the folder structure stuff, let's do that now. Kind of makes sense to do it all in the one go at this point. So what I've done is, in the part 1 resources, I've dropped in a mesh that I made. You can use your own mesh, anything that you want, and some textures. And I'll just quickly show you how to get those in scene, make a very fast material, and then, yeah, where to save them, how to save them, and so on. So to start, what we should do is down at the bottom in the content browser, you can see where it says content and then starter content. We don't want to add our new assets to the starter content. This is the way that I import assets all the time. There are a few ways that you can import things, but this is the way that I find best to do it, just because it plonks it exactly where you want it. So I'll go to content and then right click content and then say new folder. And then what it does is it will drop a new folder inside the content folder. And then you can rename this to be whatever you want. I'm going to rename this to be mesh. And you could call it model, you could call it whatever you want. And then under that, I'm going to make a new one called texture or textures. Okay, cool. So we've got mesh and textures, and this all lives in content. And this is generally kind of the setup that you want to do. You want to make folders inside content. So you want, maybe if you're going to make some VFX, make a VFX folder. What will happen when you download stuff from the marketplace is that they'll come in here in their own folders. So if you're trying to find where they are in the scene, say like you've downloaded something from Megascans, it'll probably say the name of the Megascans scene or pack that it's from, and that's where it all will live. So you just click on that and then you'll be able to see all of the contents here. So once you've got the folder clicked, you can hit that import button, or you can right click and then say import to, and then that'll import to that folder, or you can simply drag and drop files straight in there and then it'll import them. But I generally right click, say import to, navigate to wherever those things are. So I've got it in part 1. So you'll find in your resource folders for this chapter, you'll find this in there. And then I'm just going to navigate to the model. It could be an FBX or an OBJ or something, and then just hit OK. And then this is the FBX options that I said that was talking about, that you can edit in the asset viewer. So there are a few things here. You can turn on build nanite. You can tell it to be a skeletal mesh if it's going to be animated and has a rig. So you can, let me try and expand this. Is there any way I can expand this? No. So you're gonna have to do it here. So you can generate missing collision, which is what you want to happen really. And this is where you can add a LOD group to it now, so that it has a LOD as it comes in. So it's a small prop, so let's just call it small prop, and then that will give it the small prop LOD group. Generate missing collision we want on, which is good. All of this stuff is fine. Generate light map UVs is what we want it to do, because we're going to talk through just baking light maps as well if you want to use that workflow. So we want to have that ticked on. Combine meshes, let's have that ticked on so it doesn't come in a bunch of different meshes, or at least all of the meshes split up. Import mesh LODs we can leave off because we're not going to import those, and leave everything else on. We don't want it to have a new transform when it comes in, so let's leave all that as it is. And then you see this here where it says material, search location, local, so that'll look using these parameters for all of the materials. So all the textures. So we're just going to say do not search because we're going to import the textures ourselves. And let's do not create a material. We're going to create the material ourselves as well, and then turn off import textures. But if you had this all wired up in Maya or something when you exported it, then having that on wouldn't be a bad thing, and it will bring in all the textures for you, which can be quite useful. And I think that's all ready to go. So then we just hit import all, and you should get a canister. Super exciting, I know, but that's what you should get through. And the asset as it comes through will just have the default world grid material on it. And that's just, if we browse back to the asset, and then close that window, that's just it with a grid on it. Just so that you can see that there is something on it there. Okay. And then if we go back to the content browser and go to textures, let's import the textures that I've got saved in here. So you can click on all of them. You can click on different things, which is why I did some as TJs and some as PNGs. You can see you can click on completely different types of assets, and it will just bring them all in. So now we've got textures for this. And that's what we want. And this is just it telling us that it recognized that that was a normal map, so it imported it with normal map settings. We're going to go further in depth with all of those settings when we come to creating our own shader. We're going to just create a really quick one now, just to plonk on our asset. But let's delete the asset at the moment and work with the actual base mesh in Mesh. So to create a shader using these textures to plonk on it, you can right click any one of these. I suggest doing it with the albedo map and just say create material, and it's going to add albedo in the name, which we don't want, so we can delete that. There we go. So we've got a canister 01A material. And what that's done is, because we use the albedo to make the material, it's already added that to our base color. And let's add in our normal map. So you drag and drop your normal map into the material graph, use the RGB channel, whack that into normal, drag and drop the ARMM. So that's it's a split texture, or it's a packed texture. So there's ambient, show you it quickly. There's ambient occlusion, roughness, metalness, and a mask here. You don't always have to pack them like that, and I'll talk that through in the section where we create a new shader. But just for now, let's just do this quickly so we can talk about, just the engine stuff and organization. So the red channel wants to go in ambient occlusion, the green channel was for roughness, and the blue channel was for metalness. And we are going to need to convert that. So if you double click on that, it's going to have brought it in as an sRGB texture, and we don't want it to do that, so let's delete that. Go back to the ARMM, scroll down to sRGB, make sure that's off, save it. Open the material, get that back in there. So it's ambient occlusion, roughness, and then metallic. And now that should look more like the material. Okay, cool. And we can add this material now if we browse to it. If we go to mesh, double click on our mesh, you'll notice that it's adding it to this window, which is quite useful. And it means you don't end up with 50 windows of different things. So you can go through and click on a bunch of different stuff. Like this, and it will just keep adding it to here, so you don't end up with a million windows. It just keeps adding it to this window, which is useful. So if we browse to our material here, whilst we have the material selected, if you press this use button, it adds that material to the asset, which is what we want. So now you've got a gas canister. Exciting stuff, I know. And that's all been quite well organized in here, and you'll be able to navigate to those things really easily. If you click on content and type, and it will also filter out the canister. You can also add asset filters. So you could put static mesh on, and then that will filter, as long as you've got that clicked on, that will filter out only the static meshes with that name. You can also add a filter for texture, and then that will filter out everything that's a texture. That gets really useful when you have huge projects, like big game projects, because there could be, I don't know, if you type grass, there could be a million types of grass. There'll be grass meshes and so on. You might just want the textures. So you can type grass, filter it by texture, and you get something really quickly. Or you could just hit texture and hit content, and that will show you all of the textures that you've got in the game, or at least in the content browser. So that's quite useful. Now, once you add this to the scene, like so, it just lives in the scene, not inside of a folder. So what's always useful once you've done that is it's already made it for us because we're using this minimal default scene here. There's a folder called static meshes. And what I think we should do, just to practice doing that ourselves, is create a new level. So if we go up to the top and hit File and New Level, and then let's just create an empty one. And let's not save it because we don't need to. Okay, so now we've just got a completely black, empty level. There is nothingness. It's the void, an infinite void into nowhere. And we should start really just creating things. So let's hit Create, and then go down to Shapes, and then make a cube. And we will scroll over to the cube, and it's white like this because there's no light. So if it wasn't white like this, you would not see the cube. So the engine kind of does this automatically until you add a light. Let's turn that into like a floor shape and scale it up. Something like that is probably fine. If you press G, it all disappears. So that's game mode. You'll see why they've made it white like that so that you can see it. And let's just throw our canister on top of there. Okay, so if we look over into our world outliner now, we've got much less things. So to make a folder, you just right click anywhere in here. And let's call this static mesh. I'll rename that. That's unfortunate. Rename. Edit. Rename. Boom. And then we can control click our stuff and drag it into that folder. So you can now hide individual assets and the whole folder. So this is quite useful just to keep the world outliner in huge scenes tidy. There's one other level to this that we can go to, and that's using levels, which is something that becomes really useful, especially when you have multiple disciplines working on one level, and it just enables you to do things like switch out levels on the fly. So you could have a scene that has all of the ground with meshes for one type. Say it's snowed, so there's like loads of different snowy meshes around and stuff, and you can save that all on one level. And then you could have another level that has all of the summer versions of those assets, and you can switch those on and off on a level and it allows you could blueprint, you could have it so that it streams those in at different times and do all sorts of cool things. So generally the way to do that is, well, if you go up to Window and then scroll down and hit Levels, you'll get this Levels tab here. We drag that over to here. I generally keep it next to the world outliner just because they're similar things. They don't do exactly the same job, but they do similar jobs. So if we go to levels, you'll see that we're in currently the persistent level. And that means basically the top level. All of the levels load into P, or persistent. So if you were making a map for a game, you would have the name of the map, persistent level, which is what we're in now. And then you would have a mesh level. And then you'd have a lighting level. And then a VFX level. And maybe people tend to keep kind of the mechanics stuff in persistent. But yeah, you generally split it up into those levels. And then also you could have a mesh 1 level or a mesh 2 level so that two mesh artists could work on one level at one time. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go up to levels, and then we're going to say create new. And then we say create new empty level. And it's going to take us to our content browser. So this is exactly the same content browser that we have down here. And we can make a new folder in here and call that levels. levels. And then go into that one. And then down where it says new map, what we want to do is call it tutorial underscore mesh. And then save. And what that's going to do is to create a mesh level, or it's a level. We've called it mesh, which is what makes it a mesh level, but it's the same as any other level. And you'll see that that's highlighted in blue. And that means that we currently have control of that level. It has nothing in it, so it's not doing anything, but we have control of that level. To gain control of the level above, you just double click it, or you can right click it and say make current. And now you need to be aware of these. Make sure that you're on that the one that you're on is blue or highlighted, because that's the one that you're in. So at the moment, all of our geometry is in the persistent level. To move it over to the mesh level, we just click on them in the scene, control click them so you have them all at once. Go to tutorial mesh, make current, right click it and say move selected actors to this level. So now they've moved to our mesh level. They're no longer in the persistent. To make this change though, you'll need to save both levels. So just go to file, save all, and this main level, because it's a new one, we need to save as well. So let's call that tutorial underscore P. And that has saved us both levels. You can see that it also, this pressing save all also saved all of the textures and stuff as well. So both of these levels have been saved. Now that we've done that, let's just head back to the persistent level. So that's just generally the base of organization in these levels and for games. The more that you organize this stuff earlier on, the better. You can really get into kind of a world of headache if you just start bashing a scene out and you've not thought about organization, because trying to go back through it and pick out certain assets or optimize it afterwards can just be a massive headache. So I always suggest setting your scenes up in this way, and add new levels as you add different types of things. So if we're going to start adding a light to this scene now, what I would do is levels, create new, add another empty level, click on tutorial mesh, and then just call it tutorial lighting. And now you've got a brand new lighting level with nothing in it. The only thing that you need to watch out with this is to just make sure that if you've got it double clicked, that means you're working in that level. This cool little button here called light scenario is something that was added to the engine not too long ago, but it allows you to have multiple lighting levels and you can set them as lighting scenarios. So you can do things like have a day and a night and so on, and you can bake the scene for each level. So you can have a night baked level and a day baked level. Previously, you could only really do that in the engine by having a dynamic light that transitioned across. But now you can have it so that you can bake a bunch of different lighting scenarios and just switch between them to create the same effect. And it's cheaper because it's baked lighting. So that's a useful thing. You can also lock the levels so you don't mess around with it too much, and you can save them individually here. Each level has its own blueprint, but we'll not go into that just now because I don't want to overcomplicate things. So cool, we've got our propane tank in the middle of our level, and things are all organized really quite well. If we want to add a light to this, I guess what we should do is let's do lighting in the next section. But now just practice adding some stuff into this scene and working with the levels, making sure things are saved in the correct places. And we'll pick up with lighting now. Hey everybody, and welcome back. Welcome to this next section where we're going to talk through lighting workflows and different tools that you can use in Unreal and where it's come from 4 to 5. And we're going to look at exterior and interior lighting and different workflows for each. And then we're going to round this section off really by having you guys build up your own sort of interior environment using the starter content and then adding some lights into it and lighting it as best as you can. If you already know how to pull things from the marketplace, then sure, do that. Set up your own little art level and light it however you see best. But if not, I would suggest not doing that yet, because we will cover that soon, just on how to get exterior assets into the engine. So just use the starter content. But if you already know how to use marketplace stuff, then sure, do that. But what I'm looking for really is for you to use some of the lighting tips that you've learned here to light an interior scene and have that looking awesome. So I've loaded up this minimal default level just because it's kind of got a few things set up here already for us, and we can just have a look at how that's working. I think what might be at best is to just, if we copy these things out of this level so we can use them somewhere else. So if we just take what we need, which is going to be this chair, this table and chairs, and one of these ground sections, and you can just control C that, and then file, new level, empty level, don't save it, and then control V, and then we'll have this sat in our empty level. And we're just going to use this to have a look at how exterior lighting works. So Unreal kind of has, I'd say, one main way really for lighting exteriors, one proper way, and then you can kind of go about that in a few different ways as well. There are some things you can turn on and off here and there. So the main way to do it, I suppose, in UE5 is through this new environment light mixer thing. And that's a tab that allows you to just create the lights that you're going to need to create a nice environment lighting setting. I would suggest doing it this way first off, but what we're going to need to do first is just change over from the basic loadout, which I think for you is going to be set to screen space, and we need to move over to the new Lumen lighting workflow. So the way that we do that is if we go to Edit, Project Settings, and then if you just type in Global Illumination, and you can see here this first section says Screen Space Beta. What we want to do is change that over to Lumen. If we have it on none, then you'll get no dynamic global illumination. It does say that you can still bake global illumination into light maps, and that just pertains to doing a baked lighting workflow, which is not what we're going to do when creating our scene. But for the longest time, this was the best. I found it the best way to get high quality lighting in Unreal, because you had such cool bounce light and stuff like that. But that's, now that we've got Lumen, it's becoming much less necessary. Still, for games that need to run at like 60 frames per second or even higher frame rates, baked lighting is the way to go currently. That looks like it's all about to change sometime soon, hopefully with Unreal's new Lumen workflow. So you're going to want to turn Dynamic Global Illumination method onto Lumen. And then that will also, I think, automatically for you, which is what that pop-up was. If you type in reflections, you'll get reflection method, which has changed to Lumen as well. That would have been initially set to screen space. So it used screen space reflections, which just used what was on your screen to create these reflections. And then there's ray traced, which was a big thing until, I guess, the guys at Unreal made Lumen. So from here, you just want to close that out. Actually, what might be a good idea is if I show you the difference between the two. So if we just pop in if you go to create and then light and then press for a directional light, drop that in, rotate it round so you can see what's going on. Cool, that's just a very basic directional light. We'll talk about that in a second. And then if you just type in Lumen, because you've changed those two settings to Lumen, and we change those back to screen space, you'll see the difference there. With Lumen, we're getting this lovely bounce light. We're getting, bounce light from the colors. On here, we're getting a little bit of global illumination going on. And then if you change reflections to screen space versus Lumen, you see the difference there too. It's a massive difference between the two. And this one has no global illumination, and then there's Lumens. So we want to keep it on Lumen while we're using UE5, because personally I think it's the best setting and you're going to get the best environment out of it. And let's talk through some of these lights. So if we're creating an exterior lighting environment, there's two ways that we can go about it. We can either create the lights using this setup, so create a sky atmosphere, a skylight, and a dominant directional light, and then our volumetric cloud on top of it. Or we can add in something called a blueprint sky. If we turn that off, turn on blueprint class. I think it's BP underscore sky. That's not showing up. Oh, I know why. Sorry. What we need to do is just hit settings over in the corner and then go down to show engine content. And if we click on engine content, there we go. We'll get the BP sky sphere. You can drag that into your scene, and this will give you a huge sky sphere. It's not currently showing up in creating any light, even though there is a sun over here, but this is just purely visual. It's not actually injecting anything into lighting as yet. So to enable that to happen, what we need to do is to create a skylight. So you can hit this button over here called skylight, and you can see instantly that that's just started to inject some lighting into our scene. And basically what's happening, if we click on the skylight and go over to details, is you can see here where it says source type SLS captured scene. It's capturing the scene in a similar way to reflection captures, which we'll also go over at some point soon. It's capturing the scene and basically making a big cube map, and then it's using that to add global illumination to the scene. So you can quite easily create some nice overcast looking scenes with this, but there's no, as you'll notice, no real directional light, even though our sun is pointing in this direction. There are a few things that we can play with here, and I think the best way for us to look at that is to create a sphere. We drag a sphere in and just plonk it somewhere over here, and then let's give this a chrome material so we can really see what's going on. Hopefully there's one made somewhere. What happens if we slap that on? Let's edit that. No, right, so let's edit this material quickly. It's completely metallic. Let's make it completely unrough, and then break all the pin links to the base color. Or we want it the opposite. So let's make that very bright. Okay, so we basically have a mirror now, which is what we need ideally. And that should allow us to see what's going on with this skylight. Chrome balls are good for all sorts of reasons, really. They are used all over the cinematic industry just so that you can have a full understanding of what it is that's going on in your lighting. Because sometimes different materials and different roughness values can kind of cloud that idea. So yeah, just using a chrome ball can sometimes really help you understand what it is that's going on with your lighting. So let's click back on our skylight and have a look at exactly what it is that's going on here. So this sky distance threshold here is basically how far in Unreal units the skylight will treat any geometry into kind of its reflection capture. I think I've said that almost word for word for what's here. Distance from the skylight at which any geometry should be treated as part of the sky. This is also used by reflection captures, so update reflection captures to see its impact. So essentially that number correlates to how much of this scene it's going to capture in terms of the geometry. So if I put it up to some crazy number, then we've kind of gone outside of the bounds of this skylight even, and it's capturing the blackness of the void outside of here, which is not what you want. So keep it at a number like this and you'll capture everything in your scene. You can, if you've got like a really dense forest or something, you can make that number really small and it will capture like a little alcove of trees. That can be quite cool too. The cube map resolution is exactly what it says. It's the resolution of the cube map that it captures. So you can drop that down to something like, I don't know, 6, and you'll see the resolution change there, and then the quality of the lighting change also. So you can push that up to something like 256. I mean, there was almost no difference there between the two. So if you're trying to keep things performant, I would keep it at 128. This is sort of a light color tint that you can play with, and there's also an intensity that you can play with too. It can get quite strong, so yeah, I would kind of do that sparingly in small increments. There's this thing here called the lower hemisphere solid color, which adds a solid color to the base. It can be helpful for scenes like this where you've kind of got the massive void that's only colored because of the fog. And if you want the ground to be a certain color, you can kind of fake that by turning this on and giving it a color of some sort. And you can see that updating here and here. But we can just turn that off for the minute because we don't really need it. And I quite like having the orange uplight from the sky that we have going on at the moment. So that's the main settings for the skylight. Everything else kind of is pushing a bit too far on, and we'll have a look at this stuff as we come to actually light our scene later on. So what we need to do next is create a directional light, something that's going to provide direction and something that our sun here can hook onto so that it knows where it is that it should be placed in the sky. So we just go to create lights and then drop a directional light in, and it will give you a real funky angle to start with, which is currently looking directly that way. And you can tell by the arrow that we've got going on here, the white arrow, that's the direction. So you want to position it somewhere, something like that. So you can see a little bit of flickering going on at the minute, and that's just because our settings in Lumen are quite low. We can push those up soon. We can do that in a post-process volume, and I'll show you how to do that just to get remove some of this flickering. It will have an impact on performance, but it will make that flickering go away and the scene look much nicer. So now we've positioned that light. Let's have a look at some of the settings in the directional light actually first. One thing that you'll notice, and you may have noticed on the skylight as well, that all of these lights have a mobility setting, which is set to static, stationary, or movable. Static and stationary will both bake, and movable is purely dynamic. So if we want to have purely dynamic lights, which we do just for now, I would set them over to movable, and that's where we'll continue on. Static and stationary both bake, and they bake into light maps, and they're the much more performant version of what we're doing here. And for the longest time, they were, in my personal opinion, the highest quality, because you'd get some really lovely bounce light in there. A lot of my projects, if not all of my personal projects, I did using baked lighting, but I can totally see the merit in wanting to use dynamic lighting in UE4 for all sorts of things. They're necessary for many reasons, but I'll just quickly go through these different settings. So static lighting is fully baked and is the fastest rendering, but unfortunately it also has the lowest quality kind of specular reflections. They don't look amazing at all. So they're static lights I find are really good for using as fill lights, or really small lights here and there that are not going to have any big impact on the visuals and just kind of brightening the scene up. Stationary lights I tend to use as my main lighting. So I'll have stationary lights all over the scene. You can only have 4 that overlap each other unless you go into project settings and push that number up. So you can only have 4 that overlap each other, but stationary lights have a much better specular reflections. So you get to see all of the roughness values on your materials much better. And they also allow you to increase the brightness or decrease the brightness and change the color without having to rebake your scene. So in that way, they do feel slightly dynamic. And then movable lights are just the purely dynamic lights which you'll use, and which we'll use with Lumen. I will show you briefly how to bake, and we can just switch everything to static and hit the bake button. But the main workflow that we're going to be using for this project will be using Lumen and dynamic lighting. So now we've got this directional light set up, and you can position that any way you want to. What we want to do now is just tell this sun over here that we're using this light here. So we just hit the sky sphere in the background. You can also click on it through here, and then where it says directional light actor, just hit the drop down and then pick your directional light, and you'll see that instantly it's changed to a nice blue sky. And that's because of the angle of our sun is somewhere near midday. I think that's probably about a 1:30 or something, and we can see it up there, and that's great. What's also happened is our skylight is still using the capture that it made before. So to update that, you just need to click on the skylight and go all the way down to wherever it was that it said to refresh the light. That's going to be in one of these, isn't it? There we go. And then recapture. And you can see that it's instantly recaptured our scene. And we now have all of the nice lighting coming from that. I think I still have one of these set to stationary. Yeah. So there's another way to notice if you've got it sat on stationary is that this will say preview in your shadows. And this is basically just to tell you that currently you're using preview shadows until you hit build, which will then bake the lighting. So if we switch that back to movable, that will disappear. Sweet. So one thing you will also notice is that if you are looking directly at the sun and you move the sun, nothing happens. So to make that update, you just hit on the sky sphere again and refresh the material and the sun will pop to another direction. You can push it closer to the horizon, something like that, and then update it again, and then the colors will change and you'll get something more sunset. And then you can update that again. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Update that again and you'll get your new skylight. Let's go back to a more daylight situation. And where are we? Refresh that material. Recapture that scene. Perfect. Let's put our sun over there. There we go. So that's kind of the base setup for the first workflow. We can have a look at some of the settings on this light, but the lights are all the same, really, in terms of their settings. The directional light has a few other ones in that you can set it to be a sun. So you can here click it and turn it into a sunlight, which is something that we're going to need to do in a moment. But otherwise, they generally all have the same settings: stationary, static, or movable. They've got an intensity setting, which you can slide here. You can change the color of the light as much as you'd like. You can use temperature instead of color, just to, if you want to be more physically accurate. Tell it whether it casts shadows or not. Push up the indirect lighting. So these settings that you'll be able to have a play with. Some of them only work for dynamic lighting as well, as when you bake them, some of these shadow settings don't mean anything. And then there's a bunch of stuff that you can tick on or off, like cast static shadows and so on. But I think for right now, just having a play with the lights at the base light settings is going to be good, just to get some familiarization with it. But across the lights, they're pretty much all the same, and they have pretty much the same settings. The spotlight has a few different settings just for to get the cone size correct, and the point lights have some different settings just so you can like change the actual size of the light itself, so you can sort of make tube lights and things like that, which is quite useful. So now that we've done this one workflow for creating exterior lights, I reckon we should just, let's delete these all. So we're back at darkness. And if we move over to the environment light mixer here, so that first method is kind of it's a slightly real-time method. We're stuck using that sky sphere. You can add any sky sphere that you want. You could add a HDRI onto a sphere. You could do whatever you want there, and then that workflow would work absolutely fine. The other way that we can do it is that we can create a sky atmosphere here. And this will show absolutely nothing for the moment, but that's because we don't have a sunlight, which is what we'll get to next. You can throw in your skylight as well, and that'll also show you nothing just because it's completely black and that doesn't have anything there. And then you can create an atmospheric light here. And this guy we want to go into the details of and turn that off, turn it back on. I don't know why you need to do that. It's a little bit annoying, but that worked. And what you have now is a fully dynamic sky. And that sun, just because we've told it that it is a sunlight, that directional light, it's just a normal standard directional light. You could delete that one and go to lights and make another directional light And if we tell that that's the sunlight, there you go. You've got exactly the same situation going on there. So that's great. We've got this lovely light set up. And what you'll notice is that we've got this horrible black void underneath it. And we can fix that by just going to create and then visual effects and then find the exponential height fog. You can also do it with the atmospheric fog, but we don't want there's an issue currently with sky atmosphere and the atmospheric fog working together. So you just kind of want to go into visual effects and then add in a exponential height fog, and then that will create it will fog out the bottom, so you've not got this endless black void going on, and you have this nice gradient of color. Looks like we're in space. It's cool. And you're probably going to want to update your skylight at this point as well. In the details of the skylight, sorry. There you go. And then we can turn off the let's turn off the lower hemisphere color as well. There we go. So we got that nice blue coming up. That's looking nice. Let's find a directional light, get that back over here. And then one other really cool thing that we can do with this this other exterior lighting workflow is just hit create volumetric cloud. And there we go. We've got this awesome volumetric cloud that's been created. Let's update our skylight again. Just so we've got those clouds in there too. And you can have a look at some of the settings for those clouds if we go back over to the light mixer. And scroll down to here it is. And you can play with some of the layers, how high they are. How high the individual layers are rather than how high the clouds are. And there's a whole bunch of things in here for you to play with. The environment light mixer kind of it takes out a lot of the really unnecessary settings that you get in details, or not unnecessary, sorry, some of the what's the word? Some of the more in-depth settings that you're not going to need on a day-to-day basis, and it plonks all of the ones that you are going to need into this environment light mixer setting. So your directional light here, you can tweak the settings of the brightness there. You can tweak the color here, and it just kind of removes a lot of the unnecessary clutter that you get here. So I find this quite useful to use to, yeah, just kind of get straight to exactly what it is that I need to do here. So there we go. Those are the two exterior lighting workflows that you're going to need to use, really. I think it'll be good for you to familiarize yourself with them, kind of get used to how important having a skylight is in your scenes. You could even chuck in a reflection capture, a sphere reflection capture, just to help push the reflections. And then what we also do is just add quickly a post-process. So if you just go to create and then all volumes and then type in post-process, drag out a post-process volume, make that really big, and just make that so it encompasses the area here. So it'll only affect what's going on inside it. So whilst your camera's inside it, you can see the effect of the post-process volume. Click on that post-process volume, hit details, and then scroll all the way down to where are we going? Somewhere down here. Lumen reflections. Let's put them up to, wonder if can we put them up to 4? Sure. And then global illumination, final gather quality, push that up to 4 as well. And you'll notice that a lot of the flickering will have disappeared, and you'll end up now with a much more high quality lighting situation. So that's kind of a brief overview of exterior lighting. What we'll do next is set up a really quick interior and have a look at how some of those lights work on an interior. And then we can just set all of those to bake as well, just so that you can understand a baked lighting workflow. So to do that, what we'll do is you'll just go to File and New. And maybe we can, let's steal these back out again. And you just Control C, new level, empty level, don't save any of that. And there we go. So let's go about making our very small house. And we'll just make sure that your step snapping is turned on, just so that we can get it right there. Position our chairs and stuff like that. And then if we go into the starter content, so if you press Control B on any of these props, it will take you to, let's expand that up. It will take you to a bunch of assets which already exist, and they're all quite useful. There's a ceiling lamp, which you can also use as a standing lamp if you just turn it upside down. There's also a door, there's a glass window, some pillars, stuff like that. So we'll use these to just create a very quick fake room. And this is the part where you're doing this. If you're doing this and you want to use marketplace assets, that's totally fine if you already know how to do that. But I would urge you, if you don't, let's not jump ahead that far just yet. And yeah, let's just try and create it using just the starter content. If you hit starter content and then go to architecture, you're going to get a bunch of architecture as well. Make sure step snapping is turned on when we drop it in the scene. Oh, we need our rotation on too. That's great. Add some walls in. Add some windows. Let's have these windows run all the way along that wall. I think that would be quite nice. Do the same for the other side. Move those over to the middle. Pop the door at the end, and then we can just delete these guys. And then whilst we've got the door selected, you can just click a wall that's of the same size. So this wall door was 400 by 300. You can do it with anything really, to be honest. You could do it with this window as well. So while you've got that wall selected, you can and you've got something else selected in the content browser, you can right click it and just go to replace actor, and what that will do is just switch it out for another actor, which is quite useful. It's a really useful way of doing things. And those guys, well, that one's much bigger than what we need. And then let's just scale it in. There we go. Pop another one over there. And do the same this side. Right, and then let's use the floor to create ourselves a little ceiling. Great. So now we've got this room. One thing that might be nice actually is if we have some windows. You can put some pillars in the corners as well. I mean, you can dress this up however you want. There's a bit of a gap there in the ceiling, so let's just select all of those. So what you can do when you're trying to select a lot of something is select one and then press Shift E, and then that selects all of the same type of asset. Not the same type, sorry, of the same version of that of asset. To do all of the same type, you can right click and then go to select and then select all by type here, which will select all static mesh actors. Oh, and that's Control Shift and A, so you can select every single one at once. But generally Shift E to select all of the same type of actor, or the same asset, sorry. But for now, that's probably not going to be so necessary because we're also going to select the floor and we don't want to do that. Let's just push that down by 1. That's okay. Let's get these over there. Right, and we also had some windows. So if we Control B on one of these assets, here we go, we've got some window glass. So let's pop a few of those in. And we can just turn off Step Snap for this and sit it inside the wall. Somewhere like that. And do it for all of the windows. And just remember to press T to be able to select stuff that's transparent. Okay, great. So if we press G, you'll see there's no light in here. It's very hard to see. Maybe we'll throw some lights on these walls. And do the same for the other side. Okay, and then let's also add one of these ceiling lamps that we're just going to turn upside down and make a bit of a standing lamp. Sit that over here. Increase its size so they have something to have whilst they're reading at this very formal chair setup. Okay, so to begin seeing what's going on in here, we're going to need to add in any light at all. So if you press G, you're not going to see anything. Go to Create Lights, and then let's just pop in a point light. And there you go. Instantly, we've got a point light in the scene, and it's brightened everything up, and we can now see. And point lights work just as they say on the tin. They're a light from a point that pushes out in every direction, shoots rays out in every direction, and they kind of have a sphere of influence here, which you can see. And you can tweak that in the radius here. There's also the intensity, just like everything else, just like with the directional light and color and so on, and pretty much all of the same settings past that. What they do have in the point light, which is slightly different, is this source radius. So you can really start to push this up. And what that is creating the radius of the source, so the actual bulb of the light. And then you can do things like turn it into a tube light. So now you can see the source of the light is actually much larger than it was before. There you go, something more like that. That's more of a tube light. So that's one of the cool things that you can do with point lights. They're really useful for things like bulbs. So you could just stick one, if I set the radius back to 0 and 0 on that. You could sit that in there, have its influence be about that big, but then, yeah, really drop down the brightness on it. So it's something a bit more like that. And these are, the units that these are done are candelas. I think the dominant directional was done in lux. Let's just check that. Yes, that one's done in lux. Cool. So you can see the wonderful flickering that we've got going on in here now. And we can solve that by doing the same thing that we did before. And let's just chuck in a post-process. And let's have a look for it by pressing G. Make sure that that encompasses our scene. Cool. And then inside the post-process volume, scroll down until we can see the final gather quality. Push that up. There we go. Now my scene is in pain. So maybe we're going to want to drop it a bit lower than that. Let's go for 5. There we go. So as we add more lights, this will flicker less. But it's kind of one of the limitations with Lumen at the moment is that for interior scenes, if they're quite dark, you're going to get a lot of this flickering. So yeah, sometimes maybe for scenes like this, if you've not got a lot of brightness, having a baked lighting workflow would still be necessary. But this is just one of the limitations with Lumen that hopefully will get smoothed out as time goes on. So we've added our point light in there. Where was our directional light? It's over there, and maybe we want it to be coming through, to be coming through that window, but at an angle. So let's turn off that snap. It's a bit too harsh. There we go. And you can see where those window lights are coming in through. Sorry, where the light is coming in through those windows, which is great. In that post process as well, what we're going to want to do is just find it where it says exposure. So it's just inside lens and then exposure. And then we're going to want to play with this max brightness and min brightness setting. So what this is doing is allowing the camera to brighten itself, the exposure up or down based on how bright things are in the scene. We can stop it from doing that by just picking a value and locking both of them at it. But I think that's probably a bit too dark. Let's go for 3 maybe. 2. There we go. Let's leave it like that. And then you can light your scene in accordance with that. So we can push this one up here. Great. So the other kind of lights that we have are, if we go to create and then lights, and then there's a spotlight here, which you can put on the wall. And these ones are just like point lights, what they say on the tin. You press G, you can see the cone of influence there, and you can play with that. That's kind of the unique setting for this one, is the cone. You can change, and you can do the inner cone angle to make it a bit softer. And then you can shorten or lengthen the cone there as well. And otherwise, exactly the same. All of the same settings. You can tweak the colors and stuff with this as well. These ones particularly good with light profiles. We'll have a look at those a little bit later on. But you just add those into here, and it will make the light look a little bit more realistic using some physically based profiling. So let's just turn those upside down. Sit them in here. And then whack another one on the other side. There you go. That's starting to look quite cool. We're getting a bit of an office vibe going on in this person's house. And then do the same with the other side. Did you see there was a little cross that came up on these lights just a second ago? There. And that's just like I said earlier with stationary lights. When you have more than 4 overlapping each other, one of them has to revert back to being dynamic. So that cross is just telling you that light, there are more than 4 overlapping, that light's gone to a dynamic one. So if you were planning to use a baked lighting workflow, what you would do is either move those lights so that they're not overlapping, or you just set one to be static rather than stationary, and that fixes that issue. So there we go. We've got some more light going on here, and you can see just as we add more light to the scene, the intensity of that flickering gets less and less. So this is a fairly good interior being set up here. What we're going to want to do next is just create the light that's coming through, the actual soft light and bounce light and stuff that's coming through these windows. And you can do that 2 ways really. We can add in these rectangular lights outside the window to create some nice diffused window light that comes through. We just sit that outside the window, set the size of it to be basically the window. And maybe try and match the light coming from the angle as well. Which way is that light coming from? Over there somewhere. Something like that. Let me throw another one over here. Throw another one over there. Need to make sure that they're all of them set to dynamic because we are not baking. So we just click all the... You can also do it by just going to the world outliner, typing light. And then I think you need to do them, yeah, in groups. So you do all the spotlights together. Do all the rectangular lights. All the point lights. And then the directional light as well. So one thing that these rectangular lights do, which is quite nice, is they've added this barn door angle setting, which makes them feel really much more like studio lights. And I can show you that working just now. So if we grab in a rectangular light, pop it in the scene, you see that it has this nice diffusion, and then you get these much softer shadows come from it too, than you would do from a point light, which kind of creates a much harsher shadow. So the barn door angle, if I move this over here, let me have a look at that more closely. You can push here and it changes a few things about the light. So you can sit that straight outside the window. And what might be nice actually is if we pull these inside the window, let's delete those. Create some new ones wherever it's placed that, and just sit them just inside the windows. Yeah, I think that's going to be what we want. Yeah, so we get that nice soft lighting coming in along with the angled light that you're getting there from the sky. Awesome. Okay, let's tweak how bright these are. Something like that. And then just to add a bit of brightness to the scene, because we've got all of these cool lights coming in, let's just throw in a bit of a bounce light. So we can throw in another spot somewhere. Just sit him somewhere over here in the middle of the scene. Make sure the radius encompasses the scene itself. And then we can drop that down to, I don't know, 3. And now we have a completely lit interior scene. You can tweak the settings of this to however you want. Let's drop these much too bright. Same with these. And you can compose this scene however you'd like. You can even add in the skylight stuff if you'd like. So throw in a skylight and throw in we've already got an atmospheric light, which is our directional. So we're going to want to throw in a sky atmosphere, and then if we find a directional light, and remember we just need to turn that on into go to the details, turn that one into a sun. Add the fog. Visual effects. Exponential height fog. There we go. And then find our skylight. Rendering. Nope. Skylight. There it is. There we go. And what's quite important also for interiors is if we just add in a reflection capture actor too, wherever that lives. So we go to create all classes, sphere reflection capture, get that inside there. And just make sure that that's encompassing the entire scene. And there we go. You can change the color of these as much as you want, do whatever you'd like. Just, yeah, have some fun. Light an interior scene, compose it using the starter content. And then, yeah, I just can't wait to see what you guys come up with and how your scenes look. But have some fun with it and see what you get. Okay, so moving on from dynamic lights, I thought it'd be best to show you guys just how it is that you do a baked lighting workflow, as it's something that I use a lot in my own personal work and people use in studios all the time, and is, yeah, generally the best way, generally the best way to get a higher frame rate, just because of the low cost of having baked light maps over having dynamic lighting computations going on all the time. And the way that you do that is just by setting all of your lights over to static or stationary. We'll just do them as static for now, just to get our heads around what it is that's going on here. Just make sure they've all changed over. Okay, awesome. And you'll see this preview shadowing going on everywhere. One other thing we're going to need to do is move out of Lumen. And that's done very easily by just going back to project settings. And you can type in Lumen now, because this should all be set to Lumen, and change them back over to screen space. Cool. So now we're back over on the old workflow, and you've done that part. You can just hit build, leave it on preview settings in light quality. So you just go over to build here, lighting quality, leave that on preview for now, and then just go build lighting only. And then what will happen is that will load up Swarm, and Unreal will build the lighting for you. And this gets longer and longer and longer the larger your scene gets. And you'll see there's quite a big difference here in the baked lighting to what there was before. And there are also a few things going on here that we need to just have a look at, and I'll explain to you so that you can get much better baked lighting situations going on. So one thing you'll notice is there's some bleeding in between these pieces that you have in the scene. And that's mostly because their light map resolution is going to be too low. That's also why you've got terrible resolution on these window bits coming in through here, and there's also like strange shadowing going on in here, and you're not really getting any nice shadows on the floor. And this is 9 times out of 10 the issues that people are having with baked lighting workflows, with the baked lighting workflow, is just because their light maps are not set up correctly, or they're too low resolution. And there's one main way that you can diagnose this problem, and that's just by going over to lit and your view modes, and then going to optimization view mode, and then hitting light map density. And here you are, you've got the light map density viewer for the scene. So green means it's good, apparently. Blue is it's not too good and it needs pumping up. And this is just based on the size of the things in the scene. So if you were to scale something down, and then you can see that the light map, it says, is too small. I mean, too large, sorry. Or you scale it up, and then this light map is too small. So to get these light maps very easily to be a much better size, all you need to do is click on the asset and type light. And then you can see here it says overridden light map resolution. And you can change that to something else. And there you go. You can see the color change to green. So you can do that for everything that's not green. Let's push those up a little bit as well. Floors, generally, it's quite nice to have at a much higher resolution. Something orange, yeah, generally is what's nicer to have on floors. So now we've done that, you can just go back to your... Let's push the quality up a little bit and build the lighting again. It'll take a few seconds, but now you can see the resolution on those windows there is much better. We've still got a little bit of bleed over here, but the overall, if we go to perspective, lit, lighting only, it's looking much nicer. There's still a few issues going on. But yeah, you can fix those by just sorting out the light maps and making sure that the scene is a bit cleaner. I'll show you how it is that light maps work. If you Control B onto any asset and then open the asset viewer and then go over to UV here, you'll see the UV channel 0. Generally, when you import new assets, what it will do is if you add on generate light map UVs, it will take your UV channel 0 and then put it into the light map channel that you want. So currently it's using light map coordinate index 0, which is absolutely fine. But yours might be set to 1 or whatever, and then you can change the size of the light map here to make them larger or smaller depending on how well it is that it's working in the scene. So for something like this table, which doesn't seem to be working very well at all, you can see here, we could select that, Control B, go into the table asset itself and type light. And here are our light map resolutions. We could change that to 128 and then push that to 256. And if we apply that, you can see over in our UV channel 1, which it's made for us, we've got a larger light map. So you can save that, close it. And what we just did there was change the light map resolution for the base asset itself. If you click on the asset in the scene and do the overridden light map resolution, which is what we did here, that's just overriding the instance's light map resolution. So we can push that one up to 256 if we wanted. And then what you'll need to do is just hit build again. And when that finishes, we should get much better light maps on the assets, much better shadowing. So it's starting to look a bit better. Yeah, the shadows on here are much nicer. You're getting some shadowing from the arm across there. So this is the much cheaper way to do it. It also requires, I suppose, a bit more effort to get it to look great. But if you're making a game that's going to be out in production, then this is the way that you're going to want to do it. Dynamic workflows are, well, like Lumen, are becoming much more mainstream now, I suppose. But doing it in a baked lighting workflow is still kind of industry standard at the moment. Generally, this works a lot better if you don't use these terrible BSP meshes and use like actual geometry that you've got light maps for. Like some of these architecture pieces are working much better than these floor pieces, but that's just down to the geometry. If you bring in your own assets and give them good light maps, then you'll get really perfect and clean scenes. And in general, it's the best way to go to create really performance scenes. But that's how you do the baked lighting workflow. You don't need to change your scene drastically. You just need to, as you build your assets, be mindful that your UVs need to be good, because Unreal is going to take those UVs and repack them into a light map, like a set of UVs used only for the light map. So that's the base lighting workflow. Have a play around. You could try it with both. You could do a scene with baked lighting, and you can do a scene with dynamic lighting. Just have a look at the differences between the two. If you've got any questions, give me a shout, but I'm quite excited to see these little scenes that you come up with. Cheers. Hey guys, and welcome to this next part of the tutorial series. We'll be going through just how it is that I block out scenes and kind of get to a position where you're ready to start bringing in assets, and you kind of understand how it is that the scene looks and stuff. We'll be throwing in some more lighting and then doing a little bit of cinematics as well, just to get a feel for the interior. We'll start working on the interior first, just because the exterior is a big wide open space, so it's much harder to block out, and we'll kind of riff on that after we make the terrain, which will come in the next week's tutorials. But for this section, I figured it would be cool to just start blocking out the interior and let you guys get comfortable with throwing things in the scene. I guess you should have done that already in the previous section with the lighting, where we were making the interior house. But we'll kind of expand on that and do something a little bit larger and with more of a focus on setting a scene than just kind of exploring lighting and having a go with that. So what we'll do first is just load our level that we created. So the persistent level, tutorial P. Let's load that and move away from this minimal default level. And we can delete whatever it is that you've got in here. We're going to start from scratch, really. I would, yeah, let's get rid of pretty much everything. Get rid of the lighting as well, just for now. And just make sure our levels are working fine, sure. So what we're going to want to do is just start throwing things into the tutorial mesh level. I think that's pretty much the best place to start. We could start just throwing things into P and then move them over to the mesh level, but we may as well start as we plan to go on, right? So let's just get going in the mesh level. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is create just like a huge box space, and that will be where our cave lives inside. And to do that, you just need to go to create, and then we can just type, if we go to all classes, it is there right in front of us. We could type cube or sphere or cylinder or cone or plane, but they're there in front of us, so we can just click them. So let's just go for plane first. So we can just scale that up. You can pick a value for now. I think we're gonna need to tweak it later. So if you just let's put that at 0 as well. So just make sure that that's set to 0, just so it's at the middle of the world. And it makes it easier because all of our, when you create new things like, I don't know, the new lights and things like that, and you bring them in, generally they default to 0. So the middle of our scene will be somewhere that we're going to be hanging around. Otherwise, you've got to find things in the level, and it can be a bit annoying. So let's just get it to 0 and then just scale it up. Scale it up to something like that for now. Some very strange lighting happening to it, but we can ignore that for the moment. And let's, after that, create a box. So if we create a cube. Right, and now what we're going to want to do is make sure that the cube is kind of the average height of a person. So to do that, we're going to need to make sure that we're going to have to, well, let's look at it from the left first. And you can see all of these grid units here. So if we step the snap to 10, turn that on, sorry, you can see from that each one of those grid units is 10. And every one Unreal unit is a centimeter. So we can just scale it to say this is 1 meter here, and then we want to be, if the average human height is 1.7, so we want 1 meter and then 7 of these blocks, right? So first thing we need to do is to snap this object onto the grid, because as it was dropped in, it's currently slightly off the grid, you can see here. So to get it onto the grid, all you need to do is Control End, and then that pops it directly onto the grid. Great. So then we're going to want to scale it up until we get to something close. I mean, it doesn't need to be perfect. I think that's probably close enough. If we turn the grid position off, turn the scale off as well. Let's get it a little bit closer, something like that. And then turn the snapping back on. So if we move back over to our perspective viewport, that's kind of an average human height in here. And we can use that to gauge how big things inside of our cave should be. So if we throw in some steps or try and make some steps, then it needs to be that big, or big enough for the average human. So that'll be a good, that'll be a good reference point for us to go from. So we can start building the cave up around this. Let's firstly, let's just start making the exterior cave walls, which will just be basically a big light blocking box. So we're going to make a few of these, and they are going to just block all of the light coming from outside. So they're going to need to be pretty big. And let's, at this point, go to unlit so we can see what we're doing. might be easier actually just to work in. Yeah, just to work in these view modes. You can see the wireframes a lot better using these other view modes to the perspective. So you don't have to be too precise with this. You're after all never going to actually see this. This is more about just getting a feel for the scene. Okay, cool. So our cave needs to live within the confines of this. And basically it needs to do that because we're going to have an exterior lighting setup, which is going to light pretty much all of the scene. So if the walls of the cave aren't completely watertight, what you're going to have is some weird light leaks happening, light coming inside the cave that you don't want. So this will just allow us to completely control the lighting of inside the cave. Okay, now this has happened, we can just throw in a light. Let's just put a point light inside here and go to lit. You need to scale this light up. So it's big enough to see. Perfect. Okay, so we can see what's going on inside here now, which is useful. And what I was thinking might be cool is for our cave, if we kind of have a path coming into the cave, so a small pathway coming in that's kind of covered over by rocks that then opens up into a larger cave structure. And what I've done for you is I've kind of made a I guess it's sort of a blueprint, and you can use this or you can create your own, but it just kind of helps to work things out in Engine. So what I think would be good is if we import that texture and then turn it into a material and apply that onto the ground, so then we can start building how it is that we want the cave to look around that. So if from here we just navigate over to our textures folder and then import, and in reference, I've added this texture here called cave reference. It's quite a crude drawing, but you'll see how it helps in a moment. And what we need to do is just right click that texture once it's in and say create material. That's fine. We can leave it called that. That's absolutely fine. And they should have plugged it in straight into our base color, which is awesome. And what we can do as well, just to make sure that it's not difficult to see, just set our specular at 0 and set our roughness at 1. Perfect. And we can whack that on the floor. And because our floor is a perfect, it's a perfect square, or it should be at least, if it was scaled all correctly, which we'll fix in a moment, then because our texture is a perfect square, this will align correctly, which is fine. It's also moved location. So let's get that back to 0. And we can pull these exterior walls over as well once we get the scale correct. So where this cross is where the sword is. And what I've done is, if we view it from the top, it should work like this. We come in through this pathway into the cave, into the larger cave structure. The cave sort of opens out. We go up a small set of stairs here, which is the first line, continue on, and then there's another set of stairs which takes us to where the sword is in the stone. So firstly, let's just scale up this until it gets to a kind of size that we're happy with. So remember that this person needs to walk down this path. And I think that's feeling cool. Maybe we could get it a little bit larger. And if we want to fix this weird lighting issue that we've got on here, all we need to do is just find our light and make it completely dynamic, and then to just eradicate the old light bake issue, which is what that is. The light was brought in as a baked light, which they default to naturally, and because that was casting some kind of lighting on this ground, it's kind of baked in some lighting issue. So to fix that, all you need to do is just make sure all of your lights are set to, sorry, that's the object. Make sure your lights are set to movable, and then just build lighting only, and it should just invalidate the other light sorry, that's been baked onto the text, onto the mesh. And we'll see that hopefully work now. Great. Okay, cool. That's exactly what we needed. So let's just hide these for the moment. And instead of using this light, let's just add a big directional in just to make it easier to see everything. And change that from being 90. There we go. Okay, so that's movable as well. So if our player, our person is about that big, yeah, you're going to come down through here, up a set of stairs, over to here, and then up another set of stairs to the sword. This feels about right. I'm happy to go with this. If you want to make it bigger or smaller or make your cave work in a completely different way, that is totally up to you. I'm happy to see, yeah, all of the different versions of caves that you guys come up with. It's going to be really cool to see. I'm quite excited about that. So what we do next is just do our exterior box. So show all the actors, and then let's view this from the top again. And scale it. And we can delete that one. Let's just copy the one there that we've made. Cool. And we need to move that over to here rather than to the edge of that box. And then there's the other one. Grab that, scale it. And it's quite nice sometimes just to make this intersect, and then you definitely know that there's not going to be any light leaking through. Delete that. And then pull that all the way down to here. So we have a fairly watertight box. The next thing we're going to want to do is the top. So let's look at the left or the right side. And what we're going to want to do is let's just copy one of these, rotate it, and then sit it on top. And just like the others, make it intersect a little bit. And then it's just a matter of scaling it to make sure it fits in. You could do this whole section in a modeling program, but I find it quite freeing to do it in Unreal. It really gives you the opportunity to just do things on the fly, bake light in, throw new lights in, do all these different things without having to render, which is, I guess, the point of real time, right? So one way to check if your box is working is to just look inside it. And if it's pitch black and we've got this light on the outside, then it's working. And that's what we want. So what you're going to need to do next, because we've blocked it off, is either continue working with the top hidden, or we can delete that directional light and start throwing in some points. And we need to make that a lot bigger and brighter. I think the top of this cave is going to be far too low. And also we need to start moving those. Need to start moving these assets back over to, if we hide that, what have we got? There's a few there. Yeah, so we had persistent level on. Just need to move those over to the mesh level. Let's make that bigger. And a bit brighter. Great. So now let's start making these cave walls here along the entrance. Let's hide the top section. And then just how we've done it here with these walls, we just use boxes. Wherever that one's gone. There he is. I think that's the box. It is indeed. And from the top, we can just start positioning it to create our walls. If we take off our rotation there, we can start playing with rotation just to just till we get something that we're quite happy with. Now you don't need to be too precise with this. What we're trying to do is just fill the space out and understand what it is that we're trying to do, throw around some ideas. What I've done here is kind of make an idea for you. But if you're trying to come up with your own, then this is really useful for just working things out. And I tend to work this way every time that I'm making a new scene in Unreal. I'll use the basic shapes just to help me really work out exactly what it is that the scene's going to look like. And then you can do stuff like use the cinematic viewport to start working out angles and where things should be placed compositionally, which we will do in a second. So from here, let's go back to perspective. And select all of these. They're all pancake thin, so we want to beef them up a little bit. Put them into position. Now we can start to think how high, if we get our human character, how high do we want this to be? So if he's there, what I want to do instantly, I can tell just by doing this, is that I want this to feel a lot more claustrophobic as you come in. I want this cave to feel, yeah, a lot more claustrophobic here, so that you have even more of a wow moment when you kind of push out into the larger cave area. So we'll just take this time, let's move it over to wireframe mode, just to now, as we're kind of going off the image, pull these in, start to make this feel a little bit more claustrophobic and tight. Okay, and then let's open out to the cave using this one here. Right, let's have a look at see what that looks like in the perspective camera. Oh, so that's good. That's feeling a lot more claustrophobic now. Liking that. And then we're going to open out into the wider cave from here. Okay, great. So let's view it from the top again. And then from this moment, what I'm going to do is just start building the outer side of the cave, and it's going to kind of curve around like a cup or like a bowl. A bowl would be the most obvious. I don't know why I said cup. So we want it to curve around like a cup, and then there's going to be a small opening somewhere here, and then we're going to shoot in some light and some God rays, some volumetrics from the fog, which we'll do all now just to get a feel of it, because the point of blocking this out is to get a real feel of the scene. So what you want to do is kind of get a few of the elements that you know are really going to sell it in at this point, even if it's just a little bit. So let's not spend too much time looking into the fog and the volumetrics. Let's just get something in that kind of shows what it is that we want to do. It's more of a proof of concept is what we're trying to do here than anything else. Okay. Let's just keep going, building this out. And then once we've got it most of the way around, we can have a look at it in wireframe view just to see if we're... Let's do that now, actually. There we go. It's mostly okay. Those are fine. Let's angle this one a little bit. Okay. What we could do here, which would make our lives easier, is if we made a new material and called that gray. And can set that color to be 0.1. And leave the specular as it is, but let's make it quite rough. 0.7, something like that. And let's throw it on these. If you select one of them and then Shift E, it will select all of them, and then you can deselect the floor, and then we can just give all of those the grey material. There you go. Should have done that earlier, but there are lots of things you forget until you need them. Okay. So let's see if the size of the cave here is working for us. And to do that, let's just go back to perspective. Let's have a fly through. And what we should do as well, actually, is find our light. There it is. Let's duplicate it. Make another one there. Make it nowhere near as bright as that. Oh, sorry, that was just the radius. Let's make it a bit less bright. Stick that in there. Okay, so camera's going to come flying down here. Then you open out into a much larger cave structure. Going to go up a set of stairs here, along another area, and then up until we see the sword. Okay, that's working for me. Let's pull that light over there. Duplicate those. And just make sure they're all in lighting. Great. Let's save these while we're here. You can just go File, Save All, or just click on those at the side. Okay, so now we want to start adding a top to our sections here, and then these are all going to need to be much taller than they are currently, and then they're all going to sort of curl over, and then make a small gap in the top so we can let some good light in. So let's just make a little roof for these. And we can use this one piece to block off all of these here. Okay, and now this section here, what we're going to want to do is make him much shorter, a little bit wider, and then we're going to want to curve it up so it also pushes out into the cave as we do. And where are our lights gone? Now the angles of these are all got a bit weird. Let's set that to 0. Not sure what happened there. And then move our light down so it's not intersecting. There we go. Okay, so this is feeling much more claustrophobic, just like how I want. And then we're going to push on through this section of the cave here. There's our other light. I think that's fallen inside one of these as well. Yeah, bring that down. Okay, so we're pushing on, pushing on, pushing on, and then out into the cave here. That's cool. Okay, so what we want to do next is to start defining the height of the main cave area. So with these sections here, just gonna span them upwards. That's feeling good. We might need to bring the top of this up as well. So let's hide that for now. But that's feeling good. So let's bring those down to about here. And then we're going to want to copy them, put them above. And then we're just going to want to start rotating these inwards. So that we start to get this curved dome shape that we were looking for. Or the other thing we can do is, yeah, find the rotation that we like, something like that. Maybe 25, yeah, something like that. And then we can just copy that and then paste it into all of these. And then it's just a matter of positioning them a little bit better. And these are all rotated the other way, so we need to give that a minus value. And that one's positive value. Okay, cool. Great, so we're positioning this cave in now. And one thing I guess, unless we start to add them in, this won't do, is it won't kind of display any of the nice random rock formations that we're going to start building up around these edges here. We can start adding kind of rough things in just to work those out, but until we start bringing in assets, this is kind of just to define the general size and space of the cave. Okay, so let's do the same with these. Okay. Starting to work out. Right, so what we're going to do now is just add in the set of stairs. I think this here, hide that roof. I think this here is probably opening too quickly. So let's move this something like that. Makes a bit more sense. Yeah, something like that. And now let's add in this little stair section. So we're just going to do the same thing, just use some cubes. And let's just create a little stair section here. And we'll bring in our scale character in a second as well, just to make sure this isn't looking too silly. So if we're going to add 3 steps to it, just do that. Set that here. And then let's do the same over here. Make it a little bit thinner to make our set of stairs for where the sword's going to go. And this one, I thought it might be nice to have it kind of sat on a spiral platform. So it's elevated and spiraled round, just to give it a little bit of difference. Yeah, I think that's looking cool. And then just to add some more interest, let's just add in some cylinders. And these will just be some pillars, some old kind of, I don't know, Roman pillars that are just going to be stood. Oh. Stood around it. And this will be all dilapidated and old. Okay, so something like that. Now the ground level that we're stood on here is going to be as high as the ground level here, but until we get some terrain in just to support that, I think we're going to leave it as is. Starting to think this section of the cave should be, yeah, it should be much taller. So let's start to pull maybe this section here And we can scale these all up. Something like this. Okay, and then we're going to have a little hole here that's shooting light straight in to the main section of our cave there. And then what we can do is we can start having a look at how that's positioned as we come in. So we can use the cinematic viewport. And just turn on the grid for thirds. So we can just start to work out where our shots might be. Something like that would be cool. Okay, let's head back to the default viewport. And I think the next thing that we need to do is just get our terrains in, just so we can work out the height of the grounds. And then also, that's one thing I forgot to do. Let's get him, our little scale dude, over here. Have a look at these stairs. So these feel cool, kind of grand. He stood on it. I suppose that's about half the height of him, so maybe a bit too tall. Let's scale that down to about there. That makes sense. And then that also means these are going to be quite tall as well, so let's scale those down a little bit. Maybe not that much. Let's scale them down by about that much. And let's do the same, bring him back over there as well. Yeah, those feel a bit grand, which is nice. Okay, let's keep him over there because we'll need him. Sweet. So let's bring in some terrains. And to do that, simply you just need to go over to the terrain tool here, or the landscape tool. Sorry, I've been calling them terrains. The landscape tool. And you just want to hit that. And you can see that it's given us this green grid, which is the size of the landscape that it's going to generate. As you can see, we don't need one anywhere near this big. And we'll go into this landscape tool way more in depth in the next chapter. So let's just get in something that we need for what we're about to do. And to do that, we can probably just go for the one. Let's go. I mean, even that's a bit big. But then I worry this might be a little bit too small. No, let's go with this. Oh no, because then we're losing. Yeah, we're losing some down here in the cave section. So let's go for 31 by 31. That's fine. A little bit too much is better than not enough. So let's do that. Let's do that. And then all you need to do, instead of pressing fill world, which will generate you a massive, massive landscape, just hit the create button. And there we are. We have this landscape. And you can position that after the fact anywhere you like. So you can play with it and get it to exactly where you need. And what we can do is we can just hide that floor now because we don't need it. You could also delete it, but I'm a bit worried about deleting things until you know for sure you don't need them anymore. So what we're going to want to do is just start using the landscape tool to just the tools in the landscape, sorry, the sculpting tools, just to kind of work out exactly what it is we need. So firstly, we're going to want to kind of push the height up on this section here. And you can see by doing that, what we're doing is instantly making it very, very wobbly. So what I like doing to get something that I think is correct is to pull everything up in the area that you want to be higher to a certain point, something like that. You can also tweak the strength and brush size here, and then going over to flatten and using the height that I like the most, flatten the whole area off. So now this whole section, as long as you keep your mouse held down, will flatten off to the height of the area where you first clicked. So now we should be somewhere near, oh, we're getting there, somewhere near this higher section. So we've instantly boosted up to a higher section here. Okay, so let's try that again. Let's just sculpt. Let's turn the tool strength down to 0.1, and you can make the the size of the brush larger or smaller by using square brackets, or just use this over here. And then if I just click once until I'm basically at the height, that's right. And then just use the flatten tool again. Flatten everything off until it's the same height. And then I'm going to use that height as well, just to add a bit of a blend here. Cool. Now let's use the smooth tool to just push back some of what's going on the stairs there. Amazing. And then if we go back over to sculpt, and then I work out which button it is. Sorry, if I go back to tool settings, it's not shift. Oh, control, it is shift, sorry. So shift does an inverse action. So instead of sculpting it upwards, shift will sculpt it downwards. So if we want to create a dip in the floor to just show that this is a well-trodden path through the cave, or it was once, then we can do that and just create a dip going through here. We don't want to do it too much because then the floor will go under the so let's use the smooth tool just to smooth that out. Okay, cool. So the next thing we're going to want to do is, I think maybe if we move back to just the default setting and then just go to cube, let's make it a little mini sword just so that we have something to look at. Okay, now let's group those two together, and to do that you just press Control G, and then you'll see now when you select it, it's one thing. And it makes it easier than having to click on them all the time, click on them together all the time. Let's move that over to where our person is, our scale person, and then scale that sword based on him. So to get it out of group select mode, just press Control Shift G. It will keep it as a group still, but it will take it out of the mode. So then if we make that smaller, and then make that smaller, I think that feels about right. And then Control Shift G again, and the asset will be still grouped. The selection for the asset will work again. So cool, let's have that there. Create another cube, or you could do a sphere this time if you wanted. Mix it up, stop getting cube fatigue. Okay, and then we have our sword in our stone. Let's move all of these assets up here, and we can group them together once we've got them selected, so we don't have to do that again. So now we have some in the floor. That's just Control G again. There we go. Let's rotate it round so that it's kind of presented to you at the end of the stairs. So you're going to go up these stairs here, then up these stairs here, and then you'll view the sword there. Yeah, that's making sense to me now. Okay. And before we start adding in some extra walls and stuff here to kind of make this area feel a bit more natural, I'm going to throw in the roof light just to see what it is, where it is that we're going to need that to go and make this work. So if we show everything it'll include this roof in the top. And we're just going to want to view it from the top perspective. Okay, so now we're here. Let's just move this one over. So what we want to do is try and create a little window up here where you can see out of the cave into and maybe some trees and stuff above. But most importantly, the lights pouring in through that hole and allowing us to have some beautiful god rays that are kind of shining over the sword. So something like that would be cool, I think. See it properly. I'm going to need to, yeah, just check it out over the top of here. I think maybe that's a bit too big. So let's move it in. Maybe something like this. Something like that's working fine. Pull it up. Does that feel far enough away? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I think what we're going to need to do is let's lift this whole roof section up to something like that. Yeah, that's feeling like a... So as you're coming up here, we may pan up and there should be some, yeah, really nice light pouring down here. So let's give that a go as well, actually. So let's maybe reduce the brightness on the lights that we have already in here. So if we go to the point lights, just put them down at 100. And then let's reintroduce another directional light. And press G so we can see the light if you've turned that off. Okay, great. So you can see where the light is coming in through. Let's make that movable. You can see where the light is coming in through. So we want that to kind of, yeah, sort of wash over the sword like so. And then what we're going to do is let's do it now very quickly. Let's add in a height fog, which is here, just this exponential height fog. Right, and what you'll see immediately, we're going to go through the settings of this later on, but I'll do a very brief overview. What you'll see immediately is that this has just given us general fog absolutely everywhere. And you can up it and make it less here. You can go higher than this value of 0.05, so you can put in like 2, but things get really, really foggy if you do that. So yeah, it's best to kind of play with the numbers in the confines of that there. There's a fall off as well, so you can push the fog down or just keep it like completely global. And then there's a lot of coloring stuff that you can do here, so you can change the color of the fog. But let's maybe give it a bit of a yellow tint instead, something like that. And all that we're going to do here is just go down to this area where it says volumetric fog. So by default, this is not turned on. I presume because it's more expensive, and we're going to use the lights to create this volumetric effect, and it'll create a lovely god ray effect that you'll see coming through here. So to get that working, you just need to turn it on firstly, and then you can play with the scattering distribution and stuff later on, but that's fine for now. And then what we'll also want to do is to just tweak the amount of this down to something like that, I think. But you'll notice that from this distance, it's kind of not doing the volumetric thing that we want. So, and that's because you'll see, yeah, just as we get a bit closer, the view distance on the volumetric effect is, where are we? Somewhere here. There we go. So if we push up the view distance on it so we can see it further away, this is doing some crazy stuff at the minute, but that's just because we've got this light leak here, which we'll fix in a moment. Then the further away, you'll be able to see the effect. So we want to see it as we kind of come around this corner, which is fine. So maybe add in that there. Cool. And now the amount on that is pretty crazy. So we can bring that down to something like that. So you see what I meant about keeping those values within the confines of what was there initially. And that's looking cool. That's really starting to look like, yeah, some light coming through. and onto the cave there. So we can delete that floor now. Using basically what it is that I've walked through here, you can just kind of come up with your own caves, start blocking out your own things. What I'll do is I'll continue to riff on this until I get to the cave that I'd like. This could take, I don't know, sometimes you can come up with a scene in an hour or so. Other times it takes a little while to refine it down. So I'll just keep refining it down using the same blocks, maybe a sphere here or a sphere there and a column here or a column there, until I end up with the block out that I'd like the most. There might be some more stuff that I do compositionally to make it work as you kind of come around this corner. But I'll explain that all to you once I get through it. And what we'll do then is just add a quick camera and a cinematic just to fly through and make sure that it all feels right and that it's all working well. Okay, so if we pick back up here, I've just had a to and fro with the block out and tried to make it a bit more interesting and feel a bit more cave-like. I've had a scan through some reference images on Google that I'll also add to the reference folder just to help you guys make something feel a bit more natural. So I've continued on with the same principle and the same main idea, that I would come through this this kind of alleyway section, this tunnel, and then open out into a slightly larger cave section. I've thrown in some of these large rock pieces just to help guide the player and bring some direction. And once you come around here, just to help push the eye towards the sword as it's going to sit up there. So these are just some decisions that I've made to try and push this cave to the direction I want it to be. And then you kind of go up these stairs, and then here you'll have the sword and the stone. One thing that you'll notice that can bug you a lot whilst doing this is that the exposure will go up and down depending on the lighting. There's a really simple way that we can fix that, and I hope a fair amount of this flickering going on from Lumen, and I'll show you how to do that. And it's quite easy. It's just by throwing in a post-process volume into your scene. So the way that we do that is just by hitting create and then go to volumes and then find post-process volume. So I'll explain really briefly what a post-process volume is. Let's just expand it so it's the size of our scene. You don't always have to do this, but I like to do it because we might move between post-process volumes and you can change a few things as that happens. So a post-process volume just allows you to apply post-process inside a volume in the scene. If you just have one in, it can be global, but you can have two in and you can pass from one to the other and change the way that the scene looks by using this. And there are a whole load of settings here that we can see on the right hand side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this more in depth a bit later on as we start to build out our scene. But one thing that I want to fix right now is just the exposure setting. And what's happening is if you click on the exposure drop down, there's this min brightness and max brightness, and when the scene gets too dark, the exposure is going up and vice versa. So to fix that, we need to just clamp those two values and just keep them the same. So if we do something like 2 and then 2, that's probably way too dark. So let's go for something like 0.5 and 0.5, and then you can just start to brighten your scene up based on these values. So I've thrown some lights in to help with the scene, and these are super block out things just to brighten up some of the areas. So if we just increase these lights, and then there's one just here. And let's maybe move this one and just make this a big fill. Okay, cool. So now we can see the scene a bit better, and it won't keep going up and down. And I think I'm pretty happy with this. I like how we're coming from a really tight corner here, small tunnel out into the larger cave, and then we can look up and we should be able to see some trees and stuff out here. And then we'll go on up to see the sword. So this is all working out well. I'm liking some of the angles here. I like using this bit to block off the sword as we come around this corner, and then you get a bit of a reveal there. That's all working quite nicely. Great. Okay, cool. So let's save this. And one thing that might be nice to add, also, oh yeah, using that post-process volume, sorry. If we go back to the post-process volume, find that in your scene. If we type post-process in the world outliner, it'll get you there nice and quick. And then if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you should be able to push up the lumen quality settings here. Okay, and let's play with the fog as well. And something like that. It's working a little bit. And let's make that light. Nice and yellow. So it feels like sunlight's pouring in through there and lighting our sword, which is what we want it to be. Okay. Now to finish this off and just make sure that it's feeling how we want it to feel. What I tend to do is just give it a quick save and then go to cinematics and just add a level sequence. And what this is going to do is to create a sequence that we can drop in our level and then play as and when we want. The master sequence is a sequence that you then put smaller sequences into, like shots. But for this, we're just going to have one camera that kind of flies through the scene. So let's go ahead and do that and call this test cam or blockout cam. And we can save that in a new folder that we want to call cinematics. This will become quite important later. We'll have lots of stuff in there. So it's good to, yeah, just get on with that now. So what we're going to do next is, once this is open, I'll give you a brief explanation of this as well, actually. We will, towards the end of the course, we're going to go into this in much greater detail as well. But it's good to get a camera in now, just so that we can see exactly what it is that we've got in the scene, other than with the mouse and kind of like trying to pan through. So this is Unreal Sequencer. It's quite self-explanatory. You've got the timeline here. You can change the frames per second here. You can save it. You can find some sequences. You can do a whole bunch of things in here. But the main things that we're going to want to do is to create a new camera, and then this is the render button here as well. And these are extra tracks that you can add using this track button here. So we're going to want to create a new camera. And instantly what that does is it puts a cinematic camera actor in the level for us, but only inside the sequence. And it also adds a camera track here as well. And you can add loads of cuts along here, but we'll do that later. We're just going to have one at the minute, just so that you can kind of fly through. And you'll see these little camera icons here. And with that selected, you can see the view is flicking between my default camera view and the camera view itself. And it'll probably be better to see if I do something like move the default camera view over here and then flick back to the camera view. So there is a camera in our world now. And you can see he lives here. And that's us inside it, that's us outside it. And that camera has been made for this cut, and his name is Cinematic Camera Act, Cine Camera Actor. And there are a whole bunch of things that we can do with this. You'll notice also that the Cine Camera Actor itself has post-process on it that you can tweak. If I scroll down here, so you can tweak a lot of post-process settings here that already exist in the camera too. But it's nice to do it in the post-process volume, so you can control that and then control edits based on the camera afterwards. So the main things I'm going to want to do at the moment, because if we view inside the camera again, so now we're moving the camera around, is just change the focal length on this camera, because it's far too high. So let's drop this down to something like, I don't know, 18. Feel good. And you can change this to whatever you like. But that starts to feel okay. And then if we bring back the sequencer, so now that's changed, what we can do is just to start to key movement on this camera. And that works really simply by, you can see here there's this transform tab underneath it, and then these buttons here allow you to key, and then these push the time slider forwards and backwards, or push the key forwards and backwards. So what we want to do is just position the camera first where we want to start the sequence. So somewhere over here, I think probably is good. And then find the time on the slider that we want to start with. So let's start at 0. And then we're going to want to just key by all 3 location, rotation. We don't need to key scale, but it keeps it tidy if we just do it all at the same time. And just hit the key button, and it'll add 3 keys for you. And then we want to move the time along to where we want to add the next key, and then hit that again. And for right now, I'm just kind of positioning at random intervals of time. We can tidy that up later. And then here, I'm going to maybe want another key. And then, sorry, over here, going to maybe want another key. And then over here, maybe we'll have a look up. And then here, throw in another key. And over here, throw in another key. And then what you can do is just play that back. Down there is the play button. So I'm just going to move this off screen for now, but all I'm doing is hitting the play button, so we're able to see what it is that's going on. Now that was much too fast. And you can see, because we're set at 30 frames per second, and that was only 149 frames long. So we could double that easily. And all you do is pull out the end, make this much longer. So say 300 there. Pull that out till it hits the end. And then let's drag all of these. Sorry, not all of them. Some of them. Okay. Go back to the beginning. Hit play. Okay. Try that one more time. So just about here, we're kind of going through the wall. So what we can do to tidy that up is go through the wall there, move our camera over, and then just add some more keys in there. And that fixes that. But yeah, remember, try not to be too precious with this. This is just so you can get a feeling of how, as you enter the cave, that's going to work. And I quite like that. That's working quite well. So I think that all that's left to do really is to save that, and let's move on to the next part. If you guys want to render those out, it would be cool to see them. And to do that, all you hit is that render button there. All of the settings are pretty good anyway, just for us visualizing the block out. You can change the resolution here to something much higher and change the location, and then just hit capture movie. It'd be good to see the AVIs if you want to render it out as anything else, like some images, and then show me sections as it comes through. That's absolutely fine too. But a video would be great just to see how that comes out for everyone. And hopefully, yeah, you will make some awesome caves. But it's yeah, it's been good, and let's push on, and I'll see you in the next part.